place straight away.
Obvious one, but could you just spell out to us what the priorities were, presumably to concentrate on the rescue operation?
Well, certainly from the police perspective, it was getting command straight away, getting a grip on the situation, getting people to the scene to find out exactly what was happening, to coordinate activities between the ambulance, fire and police, and to make sure that all possible action was taken to rescue people, to deal with casualties, to coordinate activity, and to make sure that we could deal with the injured as quickly as possible.
Question at the very back.
Hi, Jonathan Lee here from the Sunday Times. Mr. Paddock, I wonder if you can tell us if there'll be police riding on the trains over the next, well, tomorrow and the next 2 or 3 days, and whether also you'll be bringing officers in to assist the transport police to work in the stations and on the transport system.
Yeah, I mean, British Transport Police do ride the trains all the time, as well as patrolling the mainline stations and the underground, plus our community support officers. They'll all be in high visibility clothes over the next few days. There'll be a lot of activity as we bring more officers on duty, including our search teams, our explosives dogs, and a whole range of different technical aids in order to keep the system safe.
I'll take 2 more questions, one at the front and then one last one at the back.
Mr. Trotter, Derek Tedder from Sky News again. Can you just tell me what precautions are you taking for a chemical incident here? You know, we've heard that you've said this is a standard bomb in your eyes, but what precautions are you taking for any subsequent chemical attack? We have highly developed tactical options to deal with chemical, biological or radiological devices. We've got all the state-of-the-art kit in order to go into the systems wearing that, as have the other emergency services. We do a lot of joint working with all the blue light service, and we're quite convinced that if we do have such an attack, we're capable of dealing with it.
Ken Knight.
Yes, just to confirm, London Fire Brigade, of course, is equipped and trained with such equipment for deployment, and did deploy such equipment, but there is no suggestion, as has been said, that there was any CBRN nature of this terrorist attack, and we didn't have to deploy that equipment at all, but it was available and ready at each of the incidents.
Last question there, please.
Again from the Wall Street Journal. For Mr. Paddock, do you know whether the bombs were left in the tunnels or were on the trains? And also, how are your officers investigating this being organized? Are they staying in their normal units, or are you creating a new structure to deal with this investigation?
It would seem likely that the devices were on the trains, although that is to be confirmed by forensic examination. And we have anti-terrorist squad officers and specialist crime directorate officers who deal with the most serious offences in London, deployed to all of these scenes investigating what has taken place.
Okay. That's the end of this conference. Can I just say that while these people have been speaking, Casualty Bureau is now up and running. The telephone number is 0870 156 6344. But what obviously we do not want is an overload of the system again. So could we ask that people ring their family and friends first of all to see if they're safe and well before they contact Casualty Bureau? So the first point of call should be with family and friends on mobiles or via landlines to make sure they are well and safe before they call Casualty Bureau. That would assist us greatly. I don't think we'll be planning any more press conferences here tonight. However, we will keep that under review. It is likely, though, that we will run a press conference tomorrow morning or sometime tomorrow, and that again will be based here at the QE2 Centre. Thank you very much.
So the various leaders of the emergency services, from the Transport Police, Fire Brigade, the Metropolitan Police, London Ambulance, the representatives just breaking away from that meeting. 0870 156 6344. Now that's a casualty line that has been set up. We think there may well be hundreds of people affected by this, but as the gentleman was just saying, please don't phone if you can make the phone call. We think that the mobile phone system is coming back on stream now. It was overloaded for a time today, and many people could not use their mobile phone to make a regular call, either in or out. It's coming back on stream, so check with family members as the advice if you can first. We're running our own service here at Sky News. You can see the ticker running along the bottom of the screen. Many messages, mercifully, saying that we're okay, and just promulgate that out to the family members. But if you are concerned, that's the number to use, the 0870 156 6344. And certainly many people, it fears, will be hearing from their family that they're okay, but they have been in hospital caught up in this. This is one patient at St Mary's Hospital.
I picked up the train, the tube from King's Cross, going to work over at High Street, Kensington. We just pulled out of Edgware Road. And next thing I know, there's a large flash of light. Felt a burning sensation on my hands, put my hands up to my face. Was on the floor by that point. Yeah, I can't recall anything prior to that, any noise, any bang. And as soon as I realised, there'd been an accident, got up, had a look around, saw where the exits were. Train was a complete standstill, lights were out, a lot of smoke in the carriage, not a lot of people moving. There'd been another tube stopped parallel to us in the tunnel. They seemed fine. We were trying to get from our carriage over to their carriage, but couldn't get the doors open. So it's very much a case of waiting in the tube. Next thing we heard, some guys were shouting at the far end of the train that it was fine to get off. They'd be taking people off the back end of the tube.
So that was the one story told from a hospital bed of a young man who has survived this attack today. There are sadly some families, numbering at least 33 people, have been killed in these various incidents today, so their family and friends will be hearing the worst possible news later this afternoon or evening if they don't know already. Now, that number of 33 at least have been killed. We do suspect that number will have to go up. Other sources suggest it's going to be nearer 43, perhaps 45, because we do not know about the Tavistock Place bus bombing. We understand there have been fatalities there, but the authorities cannot confirm how many.
We can hear now from somebody involved with the emergency services. We've got an interview with Dr. Gareth Davis, recorded a little earlier. He is a spokesman for the London Air Ambulance. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Today we mobilised a total of 18 doctors to the incidents that occurred throughout London, where we were able to provide intensive care at the scene of the incident and deal with the injuries that patients had while they were actually trapped in the wreckage of the vehicles and in the tube.
Where did you go first?
My first mobilisation was to Aldgate.
And what did you find there?
We found essentially a lot of walking wounded outside of the tube station. A few people had been brought up out of the tunnel and were lying in the foyer, but we had a lot of seriously injured patients who were still trapped in the wreckage on the train itself in the tunnel.
What sort of condition were they in?
Well, it varied very much between walking wounded with just cuts and scrapes, and obviously people who had very severe injuries who were unconscious.
When you look back on what you've seen today, when you reflect on what you've seen, what's your overall impression? What impressions are you left with of the day?
That's probably a bit early to say. I'm very much focused on how the medical response was actioned, and at the moment I'm just left with that. I'm very sort of happy and proud of the way that the teams responded to the scene.
Did the air ambulance save any lives today?
It wasn't just the air ambulance, it was the 18 doctors were mobilised by the air ambulance, but also in fast response cars. There were approximately 4 doctors and 4 paramedics at each of those incidents, and undoubtedly lives were saved by the teams at the scene.
So how many people?
These are our pictures live from King's Cross, people emerging from their places of work, planning to get home, perhaps leaving a little earlier than normal, anticipating some severe difficulties. Of course, we were hearing that news conference warnings by those involved that it would be a difficult journey home this evening. As we're looking at those pictures, let's just bring you up to date with some of the latest news lines to emerge on this. The US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice has apparently called our Foreign Secretary Jack Straw to offer assistance following the London blasts, not detailing which or what sort of assistance that might entail. But there has been contact between Condoleezza Rice and Jack Straw on this basis, and also worth marking that the US has raised the terrorist threat level for rail and mass transit systems, but not for airlines following the bomb blasts in London. That is according to a US government official being quoted on the news wires a few moments ago. Also, some information, a message from Pope Benedict XVI to Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, of course the leader of Roman Catholics in England and Wales. His Holiness is deeply saddened by the news of the terrorist attacks in central London, offers fervent prayers for the victims and for all those who mourn. While he deplores these barbaric acts against humanity, he asks you to convey to the families of the injured his spiritual closeness at this time of grief. So they're the latest news lines to emerge in the last few moments.
London Underground remains closed for the rest of the day, resuming service tomorrow. There were some caveats to that from the London Underground representative we heard from, Tim O'Toole, saying maybe some of the ones that run overground might come back on stream tonight. But that's a fluid situation. He said stay tuned to the media for more updates on that. Docklands Light Railway, the DLR, services coming back on stream as of about half an hour ago. Bus services expected to be fully up and running within the caveats of these crime scenes being ignored or bypassed, of course. You can't run a bus past those at the moment. It's from about this afternoon. And national rail services being resumed. Major terminals reopening. Victoria Station, I think, is the one exception to that. There was a quite separate investigation as to whether there was a bomb scare. Now, we heard from Russell Smith of the London Ambulance Service in the press conference. I think he can speak to us now live from that centre. Mr. Smith, thank you for your time this afternoon. How have your staff coped with what they've had to do today?
Well, this has been a difficult day for our staff, a difficult day for our control room staff, who have taken hundreds and hundreds of calls relating to this incident, and of course a particularly difficult day for the technicians and paramedics of the London Ambulance Service who have gone to these scenes and dealt with the traumatic events. They're professionals and they've trained for this, so they have coped with it, but no doubt it's been a difficult day.
The multiple call-out within a time zone of about an hour, was that a problem for you?
We have good staffing at that time of day, so fortunately we were able to cope with the demands placed on us and also supply the normal 999 service to the rest of London.
What can you tell us of the first contact with those who've been injured, which I imagine for many was actually at platform level inside a tube station?
It's hard to say which of the incidents we reached first, but it is fair to say that the public and the patients involved in that incident, and all the incidents in fact, were surprisingly calm. Although there were some terrible injuries and lots of people with minor injuries, people remained calm and evacuated the stations as quickly as they could.
And as far as you know, was it made clear to the paramedics that the areas of emergency were safe to go into? One's thinking, for instance, if you've got to get down on a rail, you want to make sure that the power supply has been cut.
I think early on in any incident there's a lot of confusion, a lot of information coming out, not all of which is reliable. Our paramedics and technicians make dynamic risk assessments when they get to the scene and decide whether it's safe for them to proceed. Certainly if they're proceeding onto the rail, they would ask for the power to be cut before they did so.
And in terms of having to treat people, we heard from a number of sources, particularly I think at the King's Cross incident, that never mind triage, actual operations to save lives were being attempted on the platform very nearby where the incident had happened. Can you confirm that for us?
I can't confirm that, but I can confirm there are a network of doctors who assist the London Ambulance Service in providing treatment of this sort of incident, so it's quite likely that that did happen.
And they would be, what, routinely part of the crew, or they would have been added to the crew to respond to this emergency?
It's a separate network of doctors who support the London Ambulance Service at times like this.
We have been hearing from various members of the emergency services about how in these days you have had to rehearse for an event such as today. Have those rehearsals borne fruit in the sense you feel the operations have gone as well as could be expected under the circumstances?
I think they have. All the ambulance staff and the ambulance officers are trained in major incident plans. Today we've had separate major incidents at each of these sites, so the plans have worked exactly as we've rehearsed them for a long time now in association with our colleagues from the other emergency services. It's just been a multi-site major incident for us.
I suppose one of the problems is getting around London, isn't it? Once there's been some kind of emergency declared, traffic becomes jammed up in one zone. Has that been a particular challenge for your crew today?
Yes, it was. I mean, most of our crews and the managers running the operations got to the incident sites before the roads became congested, but certainly for the ambulance crews, taking patients to hospital has been difficult on some locations.
And in terms of your interface with the hospitals receiving patients, did that work all right?
Yes, it did. We put an officer down to each hospital to liaise directly between the hospital and the ambulance service. That's part of our major incident plan, and that worked well. The hospitals were generally coping. Of course, they've been very busy, and of course, we'd ask people if they don't have a very serious injury or illness at this time to try and avoid going to those hospitals so that they can cope with the extra workload they've had. Additionally, we'd ask people not to dial 999 at this time unless they have a very serious injury or illness.
And have you been able to maintain your regular service for incidents of a medical emergency unrelated to these terrorist attacks?
Yes, we have. As well as running the incidents in central London, we've provided our normal service to the rest of the capital.
All right, well, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. That's Russell Smith from the London Ambulance Service.
It's 4:15 in the afternoon. You're with Sky News. Those who have been fortunate not to be caught up directly in the attacks in London now contemplating how they might begin to get home from central London tonight. We can cross now to our colleague Anna Botting in our newsroom with details on what we know about how transport has been affected so far. Anna, what do you have for us? Hi.
Yeah, Julie, thanks very much indeed. We heard Andy Trotter, didn't we, of British Transport Police, saying, please think about your journey now. A travel disruption, as expected, is very widespread. There are currently no tube services at all in London. They've all been suspended, but we heard from that news conference the ambition is to have a service running by tomorrow morning. It won't be on the top side of the Circle line, but it could be that parts of the unaffected services, that's the Jubilee, Northern and Victoria lines, could reopen later on this evening. What about the buses in Zone 1? They'd all been suspended. They are just beginning to resume. It will take a long time, though, to get back to a full operation. A near normal service, though, is running in other parts of the capital. They stress that the buses can take a lot more people. On the overland trains, well, most national rail services had been stopping short of the capital, but I've just taken a call from Network Rail. They say now that only King's Cross remains closed. They have now opened Euston, Paddington, St Pancras, Victoria and Liverpool Street stations. They are empty. Please go there. They're urging people to start travelling home right now. So the flights, they've been unaffected by the chaos. Tour operators are asking people to check in for flights even if they've arrived at the airport late because of their journey to the various airports. Airlines will try to accommodate late arrivals. There had been reports also that Terminal 3 at Heathrow had been evacuated. That was another suspect package. We're going to get a lot of this problem. It's all fine now. It was only a small area that was evacuated. In order to help commuters get home, Transport for London have announced that all riverboat services on the Thames are free. Also, the congestion charge has been suspended for today. People being encouraged to car share where possible. No decision, though, as yet taken on whether the charge will be waived tomorrow as well. But the roads in and out of the capital are very heavy. Expect a lot of congestion. More travel information can be found at the Transport for London interactive service. That's on Sky Active. Press red on your handset and follow the on-screen instructions. And just while we're at it, some other public service messages. Westminster City Council has said that parents will be given information about how to collect your children at the end of the day. Camden schools, we're hearing, are going to be closed all day tomorrow. Police also asking people not to call 999 unless they have a life-threatening emergency. And they've also asked the public not to travel into the capital if they can help it. Once again, that Scotland Yard phone number issued the casualty hotline number for worried relatives. It is 0870 1566 344. If you're watching in an office or you're at home and you need to get somewhere, watch Sky News later. We'll update this throughout the evening.
Anna, thank you very much indeed. That is our live shot at King's Cross, the area around King's Cross which still remains closed off. But as Anna was saying, people being urged to go to those mainline stations if they need to begin their journeys home. We saw some images a little earlier of people leaving their places of work, perhaps leaving a little earlier than normal, anticipating some difficulties on the way back. Whilst we're looking at those pictures, we can also take you live to the QE2 Centre in Westminster and speak to Deputy Assistant Commissioner Brian Paddock. Thanks for giving us some of your time again. We spoke to you a little earlier, Brian Paddock. There were several questions within the news conference that was held in the last hour about the level of security in London at the time of these dreadful attacks. Are you satisfied that it was appropriate?
On On the basis of the intelligence and information that we had from all available sources, in conjunction with the government security services, we were convinced that that was an appropriate level of security. I have to reinforce the fact that other than a specific threat to a particular individual or a particular building, we were on the second highest level of alert in London. And so that is a very, very high anti-terrorist security alert status before these incidents happened.
How many officers are at Gleneagles? We know they're now being redeployed to the capital, but give us a sense of the amount of your officers that were actually out of the capital.
We have sent approximately 1,500 officers from London to Scotland to help with the G8 conference. We have 31,000 police officers in London, and we were entirely satisfied that we had enough officers in London, and we are entirely satisfied that we have enough officers to deal with this or any other incident that may happen.
They are now all being brought back, we learn in the last hour. Presumably all leave cancelled for those who are away. What sense of the police operation can you give us at the moment?
Well, unfortunately, I've been in press conferences and so forth. I don't have the up-to-date position on that.
But what would be normal procedure? That's questionable in itself. But what would be the procedure which was pre-arranged for this?
I'm sorry, I've just lost the sound from you.
Sorry, Brian Paddock, can you hear me now, Deputy Assistant Commissioner?
Ahead.
Hi. I just wonder what had been agreed in emergency contingency plans for this. Presumably leave is cancelled, is it?
Leave was cancelled in any event because of the G8 conference, and therefore, as I say, we have sufficient officers on duty to deal with these incidents and with any other incident that may come our way.
What happens next in terms of the way that you're coordinating the operation in the next few hours? Clearly, we're almost over that period whereby the incident has struck and people have had to deal with the emergency situation. Where are we now with this?
Well, clearly it is a case of securing the scenes where these incidents have happened to ensure that we secure all the forensic evidence that is necessary to try and track down the perpetrators of these atrocities. The next stage after that will be to return London to normality as quickly as possible.
And how soon is that achievable, do you think?
Well, again, it depends on the extent and nature of the damage and where that damage is. Clearly, the underground system, parts of the underground system are going to be out of action for some considerable period of time. But in terms of above ground, we hope to return London to normality very quickly. And clearly, part of that is going to be having large numbers of police officers out on the streets to reassure the public.
And in terms of information that the public may have for you, clearly you have hundreds of potential witnesses, presumably, or people who can simply comment on the timings of events. For those people who want to come forward and talk to the police, is there a way by which they can do it?
At this stage, we didn't want to confuse things in terms of confusing the Casualty Bureau telephone number with the information line that people can phone in if they have information in connection with who may have carried out these attacks. And so at this stage we are just giving out the Casualty Bureau number, which your viewers will already have. We will very shortly issue the anti-terrorist hotline number where people can phone in to give information about what they have seen, and if they stay tuned, we will have that number to them as soon as we possibly can.
And in terms of the forensic work going on at the scenes of these blasts, everybody, of course, will be impatient for some sort of information or detail about the nature of these attacks. How soon can we expect some more information?
Well, there is a balance to be achieved. Clearly, it's important for people to have as much information about what has taken place as possible. On the other hand, we do not want to give away too much information that may interfere with the investigation, that may interfere with bringing people to justice. And therefore, we will give as much information as we can that does not impede the investigation.
Deputy Assistant Commissioner Brian Paddock, thank you very much indeed for giving us your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, these are extraordinary circumstances and an extraordinary day for Londoners and people who work in the city. Robert Nisbet is down in the area adjacent to King's Cross Station. And Robert, I imagine some people trying to get home.
Indeed, many thousands, Martin, trying to get home. There's a very strange atmosphere here. It's very, very quiet, despite the fact that there are hundreds of people on the street, just gradually walking where they're allowed to. There are a number of people, obviously commuters who live in London, but also visitors to the city, including Graham from York, who came down early this morning.
That's right.
When did you come down?
Actually, my train actually arrived at 8:15, and I actually used the tube to go through to actually Euston Square, and everything was very quiet then. But as we walked into our conference started, so one or two came in told us what had happened, and so we've basically been on hold all day, waiting to see whether trains are opening. There's just been very little information getting back through.
So are you trying to get back to York tonight?
Absolutely. Well, we're trying to. Either that, or we're going to be sleeping on the streets, which would be a novel idea, I suppose.
So what are you trying to do? I mean, what are your plans at the moment?
Well, at the moment, we have a reservation in a hotel. We're going to see whether or not the station's going to open. And again, we're getting no information from that. We did hear earlier on that it was opened after Euston Station had opened. But again, nothing's happened yet.
It appears that most of the mainline stations, apart from King's Cross, have now opened. How would you describe the atmosphere here? It is quite eerie, isn't it?
It's very surreal. It's very quiet. Everyone's very quiet. They're going around their daily business, but not saying very much. And really just probably worried about trying to get home, as we all are. And if you haven't been able to communicate with anyone because the networks have gone down and so forth. And so, yes, it is very quiet. It's bizarre, really strange.
Well, good luck in your efforts to get home this evening. Thanks very much indeed, Graham. So many stories like that, people around King's Cross trying to work their way back. Of course, this is the one mainline station that hasn't reopened, and I'm sure that this stream of commuters will be continuing for many hours to come.
OK, Robert, but meanwhile, you say there's a calm there. People obviously having absorbed the terrible news of what's happened this morning, now resigned to trying to go about things in a fairly orderly fashion, as far as you can see from your vantage point.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's quite an eerie atmosphere, really. A lot of people talking on their mobile phones. A lot of people just looking quite stunned by it all, as well as trying to deal with the practicalities of just trying to get home. Obviously, this has been exacerbated by the fact that many of the mobile phone networks just seized up due to the weight of demand. So a lot of people obviously trying to tell their friends and families that they're okay and that they're on their way home. But it's going to be a long journey for a lot of people here tonight.
OK, Robert, back with you later on. We can talk to another gentleman who took part in the press conference a little while ago, and that is Tim O'Toole from London Underground, as we watch more pictures from our Skycopter. I think it's just coming back from a refuelling stop and back into the centre of London again. Mr O'Toole, thank you for joining us here on Sky News. And let me just ask you once again, for people who are just tuning our way as we get towards that tea time period of the day, to refresh our minds as to exactly what took place on the Tube network this morning.
Well, I'd be happy to, but first let me please say to all of my passengers and to the loved ones of people who were injured today how sorry we are, and give our condolences and our concern. Early this morning we got the report of a power outage on the Underground. Incidents on the Underground always manifest themselves that way because of the safety devices that immediately take off traction current whenever there's a problem. We then had a report of a derailed train at Edgware Road, and we didn't initially understand that there was a bomb had gone off. But then once we had word of the further incident on the Piccadilly Line train and then at Aldgate, we ordered a code amber moving all trains into platforms so that we could move people off the network while we stabilized the situation.
The reports that came out in that early confusion of some kind of power surge, in the light of what we know now, were they wrong?
Oh yes, they were wrong. They came out because, as I said, the way a problem on the Underground first manifests itself is the power is shut off, and because the power was withdrawn across the top of the Circle Line, there was the perception that a lot of breakers had fired, and that most often occurs because of a power surge. So people started repeating that story, but no, there was no power surge, and indeed the electrical system of the underground is completely intact now and would allow us to run a full service.
Well, let me ask you about that. How quickly, notwithstanding you're going to have to stay clear, I appreciate, of crime scenes, the scenes where these explosions took place, and no doubt the adjacent stations, how quickly might you be able to use the rest of the tube network?
Well, the first thing we have to do is to inspect every single train and every part of every single train on the London Underground system before we do anything. Then we're going to move those trains to depots and prepare ourselves for further service. Our ambition is to run a near-complete service in the morning. If we are able to, we will institute service this evening on unaffected lines, such as the Jubilee line and the Northern line, but we don't know if that will be possible, and we would not want people to count on that. Instead, we want people to check the news services to determine what services will be available. We hope to run the entire network with the exception, as you say, of those parts impaired by the crime scene. But that will mean we won't have a Circle Line service, and will also mean that at best we would be running shuttles on either end of the Piccadilly line.
What about your staff? One would quite imagine if some would feel, perhaps if they were involved on the periphery of events today, that they might need some time to reacclimatise to getting down into a tube tunnel once again. They may choose not to come to work tomorrow.
The London Underground staff are brilliant. They always respond in times of emergency, and I expect they will do this time as well. Indeed, throughout the day, I've been getting one complimentary story after another about the behavior of our staff in handling this emergency. Because you must keep in mind, when this first happened, the only ones to deal with it were London Underground staff. They dealt with it calmly, the passengers were calm, there was no panic. It was really a brilliant performance.
We are hearing the first eyewitness accounts of those who perhaps are suffering mercifully minor injuries in hospital, who now feel able to tell their story. Are you happy from what you've heard that the procedures in an emergency such as this, when there is a power outage in a tunnel and a lot of people crammed into one tube train need to get out, that the information flow was right, that your staff knew how to lead people out of trains, that the power wasn't cut off until trains got into stations where that was feasible?
Well, I think the record will obviously be examined, and there are going to be problems with people who are on the incident trains who are desperate for help immediately, and when a minute seems like 15 minutes. But if you look at the rest of the network, and you consider that it was rush hour, and that we moved tens upon tens of thousands of people out without an incident, I think that's what that tells you, is the procedures are in place. Indeed, I would point out that we ran a live exercise just 2 weeks ago at Tower Hill Station. We do this regularly with our staff. We are constantly practicing. Because of the history of London Underground, we have a very elaborate and sophisticated operating plan for dealing with emergencies.
And just to reaffirm for people who may be joining our coverage now, as far as you're aware, neither London Underground nor any of the official services you liaise with, like the Met Police or your own Transport Police, had any indication that such an outcome was going to come about today?
We certainly had no indication, and I've got no information from any of the other services that they had any indication.
Tim O'Toole, thank you very much indeed for your time. We must let you get back to your office and continue with trying to re-establish services as soon as is practical.
Thank you.
Well, these images that you've been watching, some of those that we've received from a viewer from their mobile phone inside one of the train carriages this morning. A short time ago we heard from eyewitness Gracia Sormigos. She was on her way to work on the tube when one of the bombs exploded, and she has given us a graphic account of the scene in which she found herself in the carriage of her train.
It was terrific, you know. It was just like boom, and I could feel like as if I'm being electrocuted, you know. And I shook like mad up and down the chair where I was. And then when I opened my eyes, I saw this guy with his leg on top of my left leg, you know. And it was dropped, but his leg was just chopped up there, and his bone was sticking out. And, you know, yeah,
you're
still
okay?
on my leg, yeah, but I was okay. Then, but, you know, I just lifted my right leg up, and then out of the blue I saw another guy just, you know, thump on this guy whose leg is already out. And I managed to somehow, push him a little bit and tell him something that, just keep on talking. But then I managed to lift my leg up and I sat on the chair. And then another guy on my left was badly, cut here because he banged his head on the steel where he was sitting near the aisle. And then I saw another guy, when the light was on, when help came, and maybe, from the underground station stuff.
How long were you trapped before help came?
Oh, I just couldn't remember. But the lady who was sitting next to me was saying it's 9:20 in the morning already,
What time did you get?
I got at Turnpike Lane station, and it was absolutely packed. And by the time we got at King's Cross, then people got off and on again, but I managed to sit down. And then a few minutes later, leaving the King's Cross station, and the thing happened. What happened? What happened? I just hear this bang, big bang, and then my body just shook, and as if I am inside an oven,
As if you're
just
inside
like
an oven?
electrocuted, yeah.
The words there of Gracia Sormigos speaking to us a little earlier. Our Sky helicopter is above the City of London. Familiar, even though new landmarks of the Gherkin, of course, circling around this area which has been so badly affected in this morning's attacks. Our Sky helicopter was looking at some of the images, and earlier on today, right down at Aldgate Station, has been kept back from some of the scenes a little later in the day. We're just getting news that the Union flag is now flying over Buckingham Palace at half-mast at the Queen's request, in a mark of respect for those who've died and who've been injured in the bombings in London today. That is the latest news that we have from the palace. As we can see on screen also, we received comment earlier today from Ken Livingstone before he flew back from the celebrations in Singapore. He called what happened today in London mass murder. We'll stay with those images from our Sky News helicopter. Alongside me in the studio is Jeff Charlton. He's a disaster expert, has given advice before on disaster management. Jeff, we're into that phase now. We've had some communications from those involved. We're now seeing people trying to get home in quite a sort of eerie silence, as one of our correspondents was noting, a sort of sense of calm amongst those who are just determined to deal with it and move on. But it shouldn't be underestimated, the shock that people will feel, not necessarily in the first hours of this.
I think the shock that people starts to accumulate as they talk with people and they start to relive their experiences. There's been thoughts in the past that people should relive their experiences, and that's been that philosophy's maybe changed now, and maybe people should keep it to themselves or talk. There's no set rule now, as people had decided that it should be talks with psychiatrists or whatever, and just generally speak about their experiences. I think people have looked at the vulnerability in London and their vulnerability today trying to get home. The government have published plans. They haven't published the actual plan, but they certainly have published their own plans and ideas for evacuating London. I'm surprised that some of this hasn't been used today to assist people in getting home. And certainly some of the plans revolved around some of the mainline stations. And now we've seen that a mainline station's closed from, although a dreadful bomb, but a minor bomb in reality of terms of what could have been with chemical or biological.
But they have stressed that other mainline stations, and including some platforms at King's Cross, have been reopened. They're already talking about getting some of the underground services back and running, maybe even as early as tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So presumably that is all part of the reassurance for those people who must be thinking, good heavens, at what point do I ever decide to go back on a tube train in London ever again?
Well, that's a decision that's going to be made individually. But I think what's interesting from the reports that we've heard earlier was that some of the mainline stations are empty, and that people don't know that they're running. Now that seems to be a very poor communications exercise in London, and how people will actually find this information out, I don't know.
OK, Jeff, for the moment, thank you very much indeed.
The helicopter's actually still over the City of London, but just zooming the camera in as it makes the journey. I think it's coming westwards to Buckingham Palace, and we can see that the flag is at the Union flag is at half-mast. That is going to be lowered as a mark of respect to those who have died. We know about 33 people who have lost their lives in this series of what the government are now calling terror attacks around London today. 4 incidents, 3 in the tube system, 1 in a London bus that was blown to bits, the upper story completely destroyed. And it's feared from other sources there may be as many as a dozen more deaths to learn about in that incident. The capital, though, trying to get back to some kind of normality this evening in terms of restoring the ability for those workers who've come into the capital, by far most of them, of course, who are not affected in this, who weren't caught up in it, although it did happen at rush hour, that they have had a day when no doubt they've been as concerned as everyone else to try and communicate with their loved ones, to reassure them that things are okay with them. Messages difficult to get out of central London for a good deal of time, as the phone system was diverted to emergency workers only. A preference system came in and the mobile phone networks were deployed to aid emergency workers only for a period of time. That, of course, understandably causing additional alarm for some family members, but we imagine that they are restoring these things to normal now. There may be a tricky journey home. The mainline stations are now open as we get a picture of Tower Bridge and that familiar scene from the eastern side of the City of London, or just south of the Thames there, looking northwest or thereabouts, I suppose, in that particular part of the city. More reports, of course, from round there before. But let's now talk to Ken Knight, who is from the London Fire Service, also involved in the emergency calls that came out. And we heard from Mr. Knight, amongst others, at the press conference a little while ago. Mr. Knight, thank you for waiting for us. Just remind us, in terms of a call to duty for your staff, how did they able to respond? How were they able to help?
Well, London firefighters were deployed to a call to the underground, a possible explosion, a possible fire, and it quickly escalated, as we saw, 4 simultaneous incidents to an emergency of a greater magnitude. And so it's treated at a very early stage of a potential terrorist attack, and the planning and training and preparation for such an attack, certainly since 9/11, came into effect today. And firefighters, along with all the other emergency service workers, worked magnificently. We did, of course, deploy crews as though it could have been a chemical and biological attack, and that's why you saw pictures of firefighters in chemical protection suits. And once we'd identified that wasn't the case, it was conventional but tragic terrorist attack, they were deployed for rescue and potential fire in the underground and indeed on the bus.
Now, just remind us of the rehearsals you've had to do for the very particular nature, the very particular skills, I would imagine, that would have to be deployed when people have been injured by an explosive device in the relatively small space of a London tube train.
Yes, very much so. And we've worked very hard, not only with the emergency services I mentioned, but also with people like London Underground that have a set procedure. For example, the trains were immediately moved to the stations, the railway stations, at a very early stage. So there wasn't long evacuation for the whole of the network throughout the tunnels, but actually from railway stations, which made it so much easier that there weren't other people trapped underground. And we could concentrate on those activities where the bombs had occurred. And it was very harrowing, of course, harrowing for everyone, emergency service workers as well as the public. But the public as well responded well today in a cool and calm fashion, and just helped each other and evacuated and did what we needed to do. And I'm delighted that the plan did work well, the preparation worked well, and we maintain on high alert and vigilant and ensure that the capital remains safe.
And was it the case, as has been described by some people, particularly some eyewitnesses, that as they were trying to get out of a station which was confused, certainly damaged, there were injured people around, your officers were having to head down the stairs or down whatever means there were to go down to help more people?
Well, of course, and that's the nature of the role of the fire brigade. It's the nature of the role that we weren't entirely sure whether there was a fire down there or whether there was people that was trapped in smoke as well as those that were initially injured. And I'm pleased to say that wasn't the case, but our worst case assessment needed to be made in the first instance in order that the fire service rescuers and the others could be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But immediately it became clear what the tragedy unfolded was, and they all worked extremely well and have actually proved the effectiveness of the new role that we have to play for such eventualities.
And the multiple call-out within quite a short time frame, was that a problem for you?
No, it wasn't. We have a very large and a regional fire control that worked well and continue to maintain normal operations elsewhere in London. We moved fire engines across London to fill gaps and to fill holes. We alerted other fire brigades in the UK in case it was a much worse and an escalating situation. I'm grateful for them being on alert, but we didn't have to deploy them into the incidents themselves. So that plan as well was very much part of the preparedness of the reality today.
I mean, one of the pure practicalities, one would imagine, you didn't know, either as commanders at the office in control rooms or actual firefighters on the ground, when it was over, did you?
No.
I mean, by mid-morning, there could have been more blasts to happen.
And we were preparing for that. We were keeping a very careful eye on that, regular meetings with the other services and, of course, with the police. And indeed, even now, remain on high alert. So we don't assume that that means that that's the terrorist attack that is over, that there may not be other future eventualities. We'll maintain that high level of alert, as will all of the other emergency services.
Now, without giving any operational confidences, this business about knowing whether the emergency zone was safe to enter, the threat of a chemical attack, for instance, tell us about that and tell us about the sort of equipment you use to establish whether or not it's safe for your firefighters to go into the zone.
Well, I won't go into the whole of that detail for the obvious reasons, but we do assume the worst case, of course. And here in London, we have a joint agency team of the police and the ambulance service and ourselves that's able to go in with detection equipment, to go in with protective equipment in order to do that very early reconnaissance in order that we can deploy crews safely after that assessment has been made. And that's why you saw that early high level of protection being used, even though subsequently we were able to downgrade that to firefighting and rescue operations. I was going to say normal. Nothing is normal in today's scenes, and I think it would have been extremely harrowing for all of those involved. But they did perform well and came up to the expectation today that I think London expects of London Fire Brigade and will continue to give.
And Mr. Knight, have you been able to offer a regular service for other fire emergencies for the rest of the capital city throughout the day?
Yes, we actually still had something like 100 frontline crews that were available, but we were put on high alert, and of course we increased security ourselves. But we were able to maintain the level of service to London and yet maintain this level of attention to these sites. And that was part of the plan. We did stop other activities in order to put people into operational use that perhaps were in training and so on. But we didn't have to invoke that, and that was fine.
And you can move forward into... Sorry, I just see you...
I just lost you for a minute, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right, just the earpiece falling out there. Just a final thought, you can move forward now and provide as proficient a cover as you normally would for this evening, overnight and into tomorrow?
Yes, we can. So we now have fresh crews arriving at the change of the shift tonight, and they will maintain the preparedness exactly as today's crews perform well. And as I've said, and will continue in the future. And after this event, we will have a look closely at it, look at the detail of it, and how we'll continue to maintain that preparedness and yet improve it if at all we can.
If I can ask you about the interface between yourselves and the paramedics. I know this is a sort of, in some ways, a sensitive issue, because I seem to remember discussing it quite a lot during the recent build-up to the various strikes and so on, and exactly the role of a firefighter. But if they are first on scene, it may be that they need to respond to the human needs of reassurance and calming people down. That's their number one task, rather than actually fighting a fire.
Yes, and they do that normally as well, of course. So, I mean, it would just cast your mind into normal rescue and firefighting operations from a road traffic accident to a fire. So the firefighters are trained just for that eventuality. They're very good with people, as you know, and the men and women of London Fire Brigade are able to do that on the day-to-day work, and have come through that again today. And I think they will themselves need some support, because we will need to put some support mechanism to them to ensure that we support them, having seen some of these scenes today, and we'll continue to do that. But I know they'll be back on duty tomorrow and available to respond in exactly the same way as they did today.
One doesn't want to belittle what they've faced, though, nor do I want to try and suggest that they're not prepared for it. But I would imagine that going from rehearsal to actually going through an emergency like this, with all the trauma to members of the public that entails, that may have unforeseen consequences on your staff.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And that's why we have already put in support mechanisms for such firefighters who will have seen those scenes that you can't replicate. You can't replicate in training.
All right. Ken Knight, thank you very much indeed for your time, and we wish you and your officers well for the coming hours.
Thank you very much.
We're joined now from Central London by the Shadow Home Secretary, David Davis. Good afternoon to you, Mr Davis. We heard you responding to the Home Secretary a little earlier in the House of Commons, but perhaps you could just outline your thoughts this afternoon for us.
Well, clearly our thoughts first go to the victims and their families and friends. Condolences and prayers to all of them, and also to say how well it looks as though the emergency services are dealing with this all. But at the end of the day, this clearly is an attack that got right by our security services. This can happen in a civilized society. It can happen only too easily, and it's clearly a very calculated, evil attempt to kill as many people as possible and do as much harm to people as possible. And that's what we have to calculate around.
Are you surprised that it seems that the capital wasn't on its highest state of alert, given that we are hosting the G8 summit in this country at the moment?
Well, what that tells you is that this is a group that we didn't know were at work, or at least that we were completely unaware of this activity. Of course, I mean, with hindsight, one can see that this was an attempt to hit a big target, London, at a time when two things were in place. One, that we were in the eyes of the world because of G8, and two, that a good deal of our security focus was quite properly aimed at Gleneagles, at protecting Gleneagles from all the possible threats that might apply there. So, of course, it is a bit surprising the security status was low, but what it implies, as I say, is that these people were completely undetected.
But it seems that you also imply that the security of the capital was compromised by the fact that so much attention had been focused at Gleneagles.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about compromised. What is the case is that there is a limit to what you can do to defend a target as big as London, the entire London Underground. Evidently, I mean, there's a limited amount of resources. You have to apply them to the highest risk areas. Clearly, it would be unsurprising, as we've actually seen on our televisions, if a lot of our police resources were focused on Gleneagles at the moment, and the terrorists presumably made use of that, and presumably also made use of it in the knowledge that the world's television and the world's news was focused on Britain at this point in time. Now, the real issue is, however, the extent that they got through without anybody detecting this was coming up. I mean, we've been hearing from experts saying that there was no increase in terrorist traffic. There's no advance warning of any sort here. There have been lots of rumours about it, and that's where the breakdowns occurred. But I have to say, in an open and free society, it is not possible to be 100% sure you're going to catch every attempted terrorist incident. I'm afraid that is a reality of the modern world.
Therefore, how do people, I mean, it is very early hours yet, but how do people living and working in the capital and those who are witnessing it from elsewhere around the UK start to sort of grapple with this, really, in terms of whether they think they'll ever use a tube again, or whether they'll indeed think twice about coming to the capital in the coming months. It's going to be a difficult time indeed, presumably.
Oh, I'm not so sure. I think people are very resilient and realistic about this sort of thing. Of course, we'll have to have a review of what happened, a review of how the security services handled it, a review of how the emergency services responded. All of those things need to be looked at. I've asked the Home Secretary if he or the Prime Minister will come and make us to the House on Monday when I've had a bit more time to gather the information and intelligence together, and then we can make a realistic and sensible assessment of what's gone on. But at the moment, my primary concern is that from the terrorist point of view, one of their actions is to try to unsettle, to break the morale of countries like ours, and to divide us. Just as they did in Madrid, they attacked during a general election in order to create a division in Spanish society. I'm very anxious that we show them a united front, that we don't actually turn on ourselves, that we show them a united front. Of course we have to have the review later, but today, frankly, my criticism is reserved solely for the evil people who carried out this very calculated, very malicious attack.
We're just hearing, David Davis, that the Union flag will be flown at half-mast on all government buildings tomorrow. I'm sure that's something you'd wholeheartedly support in the wake of what we've seen today.
That's entirely proper, and as it should be, and as I started out by saying, our thoughts and prayers with the families and friends of those who were hurt today.
David Davis, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And if you fear your family member may be amongst the injured or those who've lost their lives today, there is an emergency service number, a casualty number. Now, the services are saying, please don't use this. If there's any other means of just reassuring yourself, if there's any other phone call you can make, 0870 156 6344. That's 0870 156 6344. That is the casualty emergency number, which the emergency service is just asking that we should just show, or at least appeal to you that we should just show some sensitivity in using only if you really have no other means of trying to track down whether your family members have been caught up in these explosions this morning. Looking at pictures, I believe that's the Battersea helipad, isn't it? The heliport that's used, and some people, I think, just using that as a regular flight. I would imagine our helicopter just over that part of London at the moment. The capital trying to get people home tonight. Many of the mainline stations are open.
Yep, you can have a chat to me.
The problem will be, of course, getting from the various parts of various parts of the city into the mainline stations. Actually, on board the chopper, let's get the very latest from this vantage point, is Sarah Hughes. Sarah, bring us up to speed on what you're hearing.
Well, we've been flying over London for the past half hour now. The roads headed out of London are completely gridlocked. Obviously, roads in central London are closed off. The entire tube network has been suspended. Buses in Zone 1 are suspended as well, so there's no travel around central London at all, apart from people moving on foot. And out of London, all of those roads, those trunk roads going out of London, are completely gridlocked at the moment. And obviously that's only going to get worse as we move into rush hour later on this evening.
And Sarah, well, thank you for that. I know you're going to keep the camera trained on the various bits of London to try and understand that traffic conditions as we look back again at the heliport down there at Battersea. I think the main arterial roads, you're saying a little bit further out, we're hearing from the M25, the M4 as well, these kind of areas having difficulty tonight. John O'Connor is actually with us at Sky Centre, has been with us throughout the day here. Now, where does the police focus in now, John? We've got the conflicting aspirations, I suppose, of making things safe as far as humanly possible, and yet wanting to get back to normal as quickly as possible.
And also, they want to get their scenes of crimes officers into the at least 7 crime scenes, so they can secure as much evidence as they possibly can. What I suspect that they'll do is to have a crime manager in charge of each crime scene, and then examine it as it is in situ at the moment, find out what they can. So what they're going to know, what want to know is what kind of explosive it was, what sort of detonators were used, how are they triggered, and so forth. And once they've done that, then the debris will be taken probably down to Woolwich Arsenal or somewhere down. That's the normal location where it's taken, where it can be sifted through in a more scientific environment by scientific officers. So that's what the investigators will be doing. Quite clearly, the senior police, uniformed police officers will be looking to make sure that London is as safe as it possibly can be, and of course they're going to have to prepare themselves to make sure this isn't the preamble to a series of these terrorist attacks, which is going to be the big worry at the moment.
Well, I guess that looks to the intelligence guys, does it? That they've got to try and tap into, with ever greater energy, what sources they have to find out, was this the one-off, was this the one day, is that the extent of it, or is there more to come?
I think they aren't going to know that until events unfold, because it seems to me that this type of terrorism which we're facing now can strike almost at will, you know, in a major city centre like London. It's very worrying that there haven't been, or apparently haven't been, any tip-offs, any leaks, any information coming out which would lead maybe to putting the security of London on a higher level. That clearly hasn't happened, and I suspect it's one of the things that's worrying the authorities. Because
This will dismay the Met, won't they? Because they've talked about their relationship with the intelligence services. It's been successful, and Sir John Stevens said, "We've stopped things happening."
Well,
that was his claim.
Yeah, I know. And if you read in this morning's Guardian, one of
the day so many feared terror attacks at the heart of Britain.
At least 33 innocent victims after 4 blasts on bus and tube.
The suspect, Al-Qaeda, the fear that they were suicide bombs.
Underground terror, the eyewitness accounts.
Standing shoulder to shoulder, the world leaders unite behind Britain.
And the long walk home, travel chaos as transport is closed down.
Sky News with Jeremy Thompson and Anna Botting.
A very good evening. You're watching Sky News live at 5 from the heart of the city of London. It was meant to be a day of deals at the G8 summit. Instead, it turned out to be a day of death on the streets of London. 4 explosions at the height of the morning rush hour killed 1,000 and killed 33 and injured at least 1,000. As you can see, special support gear going in to prop up one of the underground stations that was hit in the morning blast. And as that rescue work carries on, the search goes on for any more that may have been injured. The Prime Minister described it today as a barbaric act.
It was a day long feared in the capital. At Aldgate East, where the injured were treated on the pavement outside the station.
Please, if you're not being treated by any paramedic, please...
At King's Cross, where hundreds were moved to safety, having escaped the horrors below ground. And at Russell Square, what was left of the number 30 bus. Across the very heart of London, there was shock, confusion, and an almost palpable sense of fear among those caught up in the moment. The unthinkable had become reality. Below ground, in the pale emergency light, hundreds made their way through the tube carriages, a sense of claustrophobia all too apparent. Passengers battling smoke and soot. Scenes like these repeated in dozens of carriages in the 3 tube trains stuck deep in the tunnel system. Those that had escaped made their way onto the streets on the surface, traumatized.
Because all the windows came in and smashed and people are coming, and my window didn't break and I got a seat. I think the worst is people standing.
So I have no idea. It was just black and we just got out, so we have no idea.
What did you hear after the explosion?
People just screaming.
You saw the carriage and it was literally the roof and the side was all over the place, and there were people like in underwear, like with their bodies covered with blood, and it was awful.
Yeah, and there's people just screaming and just asking for help, and the underground staff were trying to get the people that were safe just to walk out, and they weren't actually going into those carriages. The carriages were filled with this like dusty smoke.
With the entire tube system shut down and buses struggling to cope with crowds fleeing the area, London's road network was targeted. One of the capital's signature red double-decker buses was hit. The force of the explosion ripping the roof from the vehicle. Casualties were expected to be heavy. This was the scene captured by a passerby less than a minute after the explosion. The force of the blast blew passengers from their seats aboard the bus and left injured strewn across the road.
Just walking down through to central London. Didn't even notice the bus. I just went across the road and then, just blown off my feet and stuff.
In a capital where people had woken up full of pride following yesterday's Olympic bid success, the horror of the attack was perhaps even more deeply felt. A coordinated series of bomb attacks above and below ground, targeting London's transport system with predictably appalling consequences. London's emergency services have had years to prepare for this disaster, and the biggest casualty evacuation ever seen on the streets of the capital quickly got underway. Police warning there could be further attacks.
We don't know if this is over yet. We've got to remain vigilant. The public have got to help the police and report anything that they see as suspicious to make sure we can deal with everything straight away. But we've got every resource out there at the moment, and we're doing our very best to keep London safe.
At the G8 summit in Gleneagles, the Prime Minister, standing shoulder to shoulder with presidents from France and America, spoke of the organisation's determination to stand up to terrorism.
All of our countries have suffered from the impact of terrorism. Those responsible have no respect for human life. We are united in our resolve to confront and defeat this terrorism that is not an attack on one nation, but on all nations and on civilized people everywhere.
By late afternoon, the emergency services confirmed that all those trapped below ground had been brought up to safety. A senior police officer admitted recently it's not a question of if terrorists will hit the capital, only when. Tragically, that prophecy was realized on the streets of the capital this morning. Peter Sharp, Sky News.
Well, of course, one of those 4 explosions took place on a bus just a couple of hundred yards away from where I am, off Russell Square in Tavistock Place. And these are the latest pictures, and they're pretty graphic too. They just show the extent of the damage on board that bus. The top deck ripped open, exposing the seats and the top floor there. Not quite sure at the moment just how many people were on board. There has been no confirmation of the casualties on board the bus, although there have been figures that have been confirmed from the 3 bomb sites in the tube stations. None yet from the bus. It's feared that there could be quite a high casualty toll from there, but as yet we are not getting any figures confirmed, but you can only guess from the state of that bus. Well, one man who has in the past had to deal with just such an attack aimed at his city is the former mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, who of course was in charge of the city on that fateful day of the 11th of September. Mayor Giuliani is in London and joins us now. Very good evening to you. These must be familiar sights and scenes in London today, Mayor.
They are. They're a very eerie reminder of, September 11. I was right near Liverpool Station when I guess it was the first bombing took place, so we could hear the sirens, and then kept getting reports of different bombings in different parts of the city. And as we were walking through and driving through the streets of the city, it was remarkable how the people of London responded calmly, bravely. Our hearts go out to them. We feel a tremendous empathy with them. I think every New Yorker would probably join me in saying that we feel very, very much, and understand what you're going through. And this is a difficult time, but the people of London have responded in exactly the right way, with bravery and by moving forward, and the emergency services people appeared to have responded as if they've been very, very well trained, and were expecting, not necessarily attacks today, but at some point they were expecting attacks like this, and they seem to be prepared for it.
What did you feel was the biggest single thing you learnt in the aftermath of 9/11, something that you could pass on that would be positive and helpful for the people of London in coping with this current crisis?
In a strange way, a lot of our response to September 11 was modeling ourselves as much as we could on the people of London back during the Second World War. The incredibly brave way in which they withstood those attacks. I used that as a model for the people of New York City and said if the people of London could go through the constant bombings every day during the Battle of Britain, we can go through what we're going through and be able to find a way out of it. So, the people of London have once again demonstrated that with this reaction to this terrible set of terrorist attacks, that they know how to care for those who have been attacked, do it in a kind and compassionate and professional way, and then at the same time, continue to move forward. If you walk through the streets of the City of London today, I mean, you see very resolved and very, very determined people. And I think in that sense, you really turn around some of what these terrorists are trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve chaos. They're trying to achieve an emotional response that shows that they can interrupt our way of life. And if we can respond the way the emergency services in London today responded, the police and everyone else, and the people of London, that goes a long way in taking a lot of the effect out of these cowardly and horrible attacks.
But Matt Giuliani, does what happened in New York on 9/11, what happened in Madrid last year, what's happened in London today, merely emphasize the fact that it is very difficult to guard against the threat of terrorism in the cities of the free world?
Well, of course it is. I mean, all three cities that you mentioned are huge, gigantic. They're open places. They're cities that have democracy and freedom of movement. And just by that very nature, the number of targets is endless. And no matter how good your policing, and the policing in London is right at the top, one of the very, very best. Unfortunately, these people can try to figure out the places somebody isn't concentrating, isn't looking. And there are an endless number of places like that. So you do the best that you can to try to find out about these attacks in advance. Hard to say how many have been prevented that could have taken place up until this point by police work and intelligence. And then you've got to be ready, the way the police are in New York and the police are in London, to then have the best emergency response possible, because that saves lives, it minimizes the chance of panic, and this is a very, very well-trained emergency force. I could see that just by what I've seen both in person and on television.
Rudolph Giuliani, former mayor of New York, thank you very much for joining us live on Sky News. For the very latest from Russell Square in the heart of London, back to the Sky News headquarters and Anna.
Yes, Jeremy, thank you. 4 explosions, brutally timed for maximum impact. Here's what we know so far. At 8:51 this morning, there was an explosion in a tunnel about 100 yards from Liverpool Street Station at the east of the capital's financial district. It left 7 people dead. The emergency services were called immediately. Passengers on trains and stations nearby reported hearing loud bangs from the tunnels. An emergency shutdown of the electricity system soon brought the whole of the tube network to a standstill. Events in the city were closely followed at 8:56 by a second explosion, killing 21 people between Russell Square and King's Cross. Then at 9:17, a third blast killed 5 travellers, this time on a tube heading into Edgware Road Station in north-west London. The bomb damaged 2 other trains nearby. Half an hour later, at 9:47, there was an explosion in the back of a double-decker bus at the junction of Woburn Place and Tavistock Square. It's still not known how many passengers or bystanders died there. And while there have been reports of other blasts, the Home Secretary has only confirmed these 4.
Thanks, Anna. Well, within minutes of the explosions this morning, a very well-rehearsed emergency operation swung into place. Hundreds and hundreds of injured were ferried to local hospitals with what appeared to be enormous efficiency this morning. And Sky's health correspondent Thomas Moore is now at the Royal London Hospital. Evening, Thomas.
Yes, the hospital has received around 200 patients through the day, most of them from the scene of the Aldgate blast, which is only about half a mile away. 75 patients are still being treated. 10 are in a serious condition. Another 6 remain critical. Within minutes of the first blast, hospitals around the capital triggered their major emergency plans. Mobile medical teams were dispatched to each of the scenes to stabilise seriously injured casualties and treat the walking wounded. The Royal London Hospital, just 500 metres from the Aldgate blast, received the largest number of casualties. The helicopter ambulance based at the hospital flew in several critically injured patients. A convoy of double-decker buses brought those with minor injuries. Most were discharged soon after. Others needed immediate surgery.
Breaks to the legs, breaks to the bones, bony skeleton, burns, quite a lot of burns, which are fairly superficial, but nevertheless flash burns and inhalational burns as well.
Casualties were distributed around 6 hospitals across the capital. At St Mary's in Paddington, this man was treated for burns and lacerations. He had been on his way to work.
We just pulled out of Edgware Road, and next thing I know, there's a large flash of light. Felt a burning sensation on my hands, put my hands up to my face. Was on the floor by that point. Yeah, I can't recall anything prior to that, any noise, any bang. And as soon as I realised, there'd been an accident, got up, had a look around, saw where the exits were. Train was a complete standstill, lights are out, a lot of smoke in the carriage, not a lot of people moving.
As patients were stabilised, some were transferred for specialist treatment. Others remain in intensive care. London's hospitals have had to cope with bomb blasts and train crashes in the past. They have major incident plans to cope with the large number of casualties. Here they brought in extra staff, more blood, and they cancelled routine operations. Doctors described the atmosphere inside A&E as calm. Medical staff learned to deal with trauma, but this was on a scale they hope never to see again.
Thomas, still a little bit unclear about the number of fatalities and the full number of casualties. Do you get the feeling that the hospitals around London are still braced for more to come?
No, Jeremy, I have to say that all has been quiet on the helipad, some 7 stories above me. We haven't seen it coming in. It was very busy earlier in the day, as you'd imagine, bringing the more seriously injured into this specialist trauma unit. Nor have we seen any ambulances. So I would imagine that there will be no more serious injuries coming into the hospitals now. It's more a question of stabilising them, ensuring that they have the operations they need to have, and then moving them on to other specialist hospitals, burns hospitals, head injuries hospitals, as is required.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. The very latest on the casualty front there. Thomas Moore down at the Royal London Hospital. Well, we know that the tubes are still out of action, still suspended, and Zone 1 buses, and I've seen tens of thousands of people walking, trying to get out of London tonight. But of course there's chaos on the roads as people try to get out of the city. Sarah Hughes is in the Skycopter. Give us a feeling of what it looks like from there, Sarah.
Well, Jeremy, we're just above Heathrow Airport at the moment, looking at the M4 approach to the airport, and you can see it's absolute gridlock here at the moment. Heathrow says its flights are operating normally, but there will be some delays as passengers can't get to the airport. And you can see, I don't know if you can make out from the pictures at the moment, some people have got out of their cars, got out of taxis, and they are pulling their suitcases along the hard shoulder and running towards Heathrow Airport along that spur road there. It is absolute gridlock. And we've seen this as we've travelled out from central London along the M4 here, that we've seen absolute gridlock on a lot of the roads as people are trying to get out of London. Of course, many thinking that their cars are the only option. There are no bus services running in central London. The tube network has been suspended. Mainline train stations, most of them are open, but of course there is major problems with travelling around central London and here as we see at Heathrow.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, let's get another view from down on the ground. Robert Nisbet's at King's Cross Station. What does it look like there, Robert?
Well, Jeremy, 3 million people use the tube in London every day, and King's Cross is one of the most important transport nodes. There are 6 underground lines that go through that station, and King's Cross is the one mainline station that is still closed. You may be able to see just along the pavement people making their way home. We've seen streams of thousands of people. A very eerie atmosphere here. People are very quiet, people on mobile phones and talking to their loved ones to say that they're okay. We have 3 people who are going to be trying to get home this evening. Let's start off with Tom. Where have you got to get back to tonight?
I've got to get back to between Coventry and Birmingham this evening. I came down this morning. I'm a business consultant and I've got a client who I'm doing some work for in London, so I came down this morning and back again tomorrow.
How are you going to get home?
I hope my train is running from Euston. I'm told by my wife that Euston is open and I'm just trying to walk there now.
So how would you describe the atmosphere here? It is slightly strange.
Strange, it's quite frightening. This morning was, didn't know what happened. I was on possibly the last tube out of Euston going south, and it didn't stop until it got to London Bridge. I wanted to get out 2 stops later. And it was only then that we started to hear, and I got on a bus at London Bridge, that there were some problems. And it's only talking to you guys that I've realised the extent of the situation. Didn't realise so many people are being killed. It's appalling.
So a lot of people here just beginning to realise the full extent.
Absolutely. Those who are at home in other parts of the country, or if they've been driving somewhere, they'll know, but much better than I do. I don't even know how many incidents there were and what the situation has been.
Tom, thank you very much. Good luck getting back. If I can talk to Katie and Gareth now. You two are from Australia?
Yeah, we're from Melbourne.
So explain your experience this morning.
Well, just trying to get to Moorgate. Well, that was fine, but afterwards I only missed the bomb at Liverpool station by 20 minutes, I think it was.
And how are you hoping to get back tonight?
We're going to go to Wilson Green and probably walk or get a taxi if we
There
can.
aren't any taxis available, so looks like we'll be walking.
Look, the best of luck. I think you'll be walking with a lot of people, as you can see behind, thousands of people making their slow progress back, waiting for King's Cross, perhaps to reopen the mainline station later on this evening.
Thanks, Robert, and also Sarah up in the Skycop to bring you more what is in fact now travel news, really, as people try to find a way of getting out of the city tonight, either by road or rail, or as I've seen, an awful lot of people on foot as well. Well, who could have been behind these blasts? We know that several groups loosely linked to Al-Qaeda have already claimed responsibility, mainly on websites so far. Scotland Yard tell us that they have had no official notice that anybody is claiming these attacks. So Sky's Tim Marshall has been trying to examine who could have been behind the attacks.
Shocking, but not surprising. No warning from the terrorists, but one made repeatedly by the authorities.
It would be inconceivable, really, that one day some will not get through.
Ever since September the 11th, 2001, the British authorities have feared an attack. Britons died at Bali in 2002 as the war on terror and of terror got into full swing. In Istanbul in 2003, British interests and lives were directly targeted with explosions at the consulate and at the HSBC Bank.
I'm English!
Geographically, things got closer to home in Madrid last year. That attack was carried out by an Islamic terror group. London bears a striking similarity. Both operations targeted the capital city's transport system. Both took place during the morning rush hour. Madrid and London suffered multiple closely timed attacks, and on both occasions the attacks coincided with major events. In Spain, the election; in Britain, G8. The Madrid attacks indirectly led to a new Spanish government pulling its troops out of Iraq. Already a previously unknown Islamist group called Al-Qaeda in Europe is saying it carried out the London bombings in revenge for the British presence there. There's no reason to believe the claim, but the motive is likely to be connected. This is the type of group most likely to be involved. Islamist, Bin Laden-inspired, Afghan-trained. Capable of putting together the bombs, the money and the plan over the long term.
We're looking at a group of sleepers. There'll be people who have been here for many, possibly many years, who have given no evidence of any criminality or suspicion, who will have been accumulating money and accumulating material of some kind, but behaving in a normal way, amalgamating and merging with the rest of the Muslim community of London, which is very large. And one day somebody will say, well, let's go for the G8. It's our turn today.
So the hunt is on. MI6, MI5 and the anti-terrorist squad are searching for a group they now know are in the UK. That's for the short term. As part of the bigger picture, there's still Afghanistan. There are still Al-Qaeda-type bases there using drug money as finance for operations. Targeting them is about to go up the British list of priorities. Tim Marshall, Sky News.
Well, from here in the centre of London, where it's still packed full of commuters trying to find a way out of the city tonight, with so many streets blocked because of the blasts at rush hour this morning. And as we know that the trains, the tubes in central London, right the way across central London, have been suspended and have been all day within minutes of those blasts this morning. And also all Zone 1 buses, the ones that normally ply the busiest routes right here in the heart of the capital city, they too are shut down, as we've been hearing from our correspondents, Sarah Hughes up in the Skycopter, Robert Nisbet down at King's Cross. Trains, there are some trains running, but not as frequently as normal. The roads out of London are absolutely gridlocked, so it's a nightmare in the aftermath of this morning's blast. Some real problems tonight. Meanwhile, the search goes on to see if there are any more people who were hurt in this morning's blast, whether there are any more signs. Of course, the teams of forensic experts and detectives out around the stations, around the bomb sites, trying to get a clue as to who could have been behind these blasts this morning. More from the centre of London in a moment. Meanwhile, let's catch up with the rest of the headlines with Anna back at Sky Centre.
Jeremy, thanks very much indeed. We've been hearing again from Tony Blair. Hope to bring you those pictures very shortly. He has said, we will stand by our values. Britain will not be terrorised. And he's thanked the Muslim Council as well. They're the devastation of that bus, the number 30 bus. We've also just found out that it was actually on a diversion today, according to unions. The bus would normally have passed close to King's Cross, which was itself hit by the second tube explosion. The driver, who was injured in the attack, had to stop to ask the name of a street. That's on Woburn Place and the corner of Tavistock Square. Also, we're finding out that the Union flag will be flown at half-mast on all government buildings tomorrow. It already is on Buckingham Palace at the request of the Queen as a mark of respect and courtesy to those who have died and injured in these attacks. 33 dead. That number will rise. We still don't know how many died in the bus attack. 300 minor injuries, 45 seriously injured, taken to a number of hospitals right around London. Also hearing that hotels, B&Bs and guest houses have been flooded by commuters who can't get home and tourists who also can't leave London themselves. And 252 specialist officers from the Metropolitan Police and from the City of London Police have also been flown back, like Tony Blair himself, from the Glen Eagles G8 summit up in Scotland. One final thought as well, the threat levels across Europe have been raised, and also just hearing from the United States, it has raised its threat level on all mass transit and train systems to high, that according to the Homeland Security Secretary. Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Anna. Well, as Anna was suggesting there, of course, the bombs came this morning just as Tony Blair was about to sit down and start chairing the first session of the G8 summit up at Glen Eagles in Scotland, where I was this morning as well, as he flew back down to London to oversee the whole operation and the aftermath of the bombs. President George Bush, who was there at the summit, said that America would back Britain every inch of the way and would be right behind Britain in hunting down and trying to capture the people responsible for today's attacks.
An emergency, a fast-moving crisis, and a 330-mile dash back to London for Tony Blair. A day that began with talks with George Bush in a cheerful and upbeat mood suddenly and dramatically changed. 3 hours later, Mr. Blair returned, condemning the London bombers as barbaric.
It's important, however, that those engaged in terrorism realise that our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people in a desire to impose extremism on the world.
The terrorists would never succeed, said Mr. Blair, and the summit would go on. But throughout Gleneagles, officers from the Metropolitan Police, who 24 hours earlier were clashing with anti-summit protesters, were among those watching the horror unfolding in London. President Bush, with his own memories of September the 11th 4 years ago, endorsed Mr. Blair's message to the bombers.
The war on terror goes on. I was most impressed by the resolve of all the leaders in the room. Their resolve is as strong as my resolve, and that is we will not yield to these people.
In London, the Home Secretary chaired a meeting of the Emergency Cabinet Committee, COBRA, and then briefed MPs.
I want to begin by expressing on behalf of the whole country our sympathy for those injured and the friends and families of those who've died.
This morning's explosions were acts of almost unspeakable depravity and wickedness.
In Singapore, Ken Livingstone's elation after London's Olympic bid victory had turned to anger as he too returned to London.
This was not a terrorist attack against the mighty and the powerful. It was not aimed at presidents or prime ministers. It was aimed at ordinary working-class Londoners, black and white, Muslim and Christian, Hindu and Jew, young and old. Indiscriminate attempt to slaughter.
Back in Scotland, the Foreign Secretary Jack Straw arrived to host the G8 summit in Mr. Blair's absence until the Prime Minister's planned return later this evening. John Craig, Sky News, Gleneagles.
So, Tony Blair in London, he's been at COBRA today, he now has this statement for the British people.
Terrible and tragic atrocity that has cost many innocent lives. I've just attended a meeting of the government's emergency committee, received a full report from the ministers and the officials responsible. There will be announcements made in respect of the various services. In particular, we hope the underground, insofar as is possible, and rail and bus services are up and running as swiftly as possible. I would like again to express my profound condolences to the families of the victims and to those who are casualties of this terrorist act. I would also like to thank the emergency services that have been magnificent today in every respect. There will, of course, now be the most intense police and security service action to make sure that we bring those responsible to justice. I would also pay tribute to the stoicism and resilience of the people of London who have responded in a way typical of them. In addition, I welcome the statement that's been put out by the Muslim Council of Great Britain. We know that these people act in the name of Islam, but we also know that the vast and overwhelming majority of Muslims here and abroad are decent and law-abiding people who abhor this act of terrorism every bit as much as we do. It is through terrorism that the people that have committed this terrible act express their values. And it's right at this moment that we demonstrate ours. I think we all know what they're trying to do. They're trying to use the slaughter of innocent people to cow us, to frighten us out of doing the things that we want to do, of trying to stop us going about our business as normal, as we're entitled to do. and they should not and they must not succeed. When they try to intimidate us, we will not be intimidated. When they seek to change our country or our way of life by these methods, we will not be changed. When they try to divide our people or weaken our resolve, we will not be divided, and our resolve will hold firm. We will show, by our spirit and dignity, and by a quiet but true strength that there is in the British people, that our values will long outlast theirs. The purpose of terrorism is just that. It is to terrorize people, and we will not be terrorized. I'd like once again to express my sympathy and my sorrow for those families who will be grieving so unexpectedly and tragically tonight. This is a very sad day for the British people, but we will hold true to the British way of life. Thank you.
The Prime Minister with some very profound and serious words for the whole country there, and a warning to the terrorists who perpetrated these acts today that Britain will not be moved, will not change, will not alter its values, will not be intimidated. Well, let's see what devastation they wrought on London this morning, these terrorists. There were 4 blasts, 3 at underground stations, and this one in a double-decker, familiar red London bus, which you see around the city, of course, in the hundreds every day. This one very graphically shows the extent, the devastation caused by one of those bombs this morning. The whole of the top of the bus ripped away, exposing the seats underneath. We are still uncertain about just how many people were on board that bus, how serious the casualties were on board. We know more about what happened at the stations. We're still waiting for confirmation from the police, the ambulance services, and from the hospitals about just how many people were on board and how many fatalities, how many casualties, but one can only guess looking at the devastation on board that bus. Well, let's go straight to Glen Eagles now, where the Prime Minister was, of course, due to be heading up the G8 summit during the day. Our political editor, Adam Bolton, is there, and powerful words from the Prime Minister, Adam.
Yes, I mean, a quite extraordinary day for the Prime Minister. Interesting that he left no room for doubt that he believes this is Islamic fundamentalism, terrorism, yet again, in those words. And repeatedly, he's made 3 statements today stressing that they would not prevail, that British values would prevail, the values of democracy. What we saw was the Prime Minister first getting the news this morning and making a statement on his own. He then made a quite extraordinary statement, flanked by 14 other leaders, not just the leaders of countries like America and Japan and France and Germany, who are here in any case, but also the so-called outreach countries, really some of the most powerful countries in the world, like China, India, Mexico, South Africa. All those leaders stood behind the Prime Minister as he yet again said that the values of democracy would prevail, that terrorism would be defeated. And now we've seen him visibly very moved, having returned to London early this afternoon for briefings from the police and the security services on the situation. He's going to come back here, but I suspect it will be fairly late on this evening and try and wrap up this summit tomorrow. But I think there's no doubt at all that having got the leaders to combine in that statement on the war on terror, that we'll be hearing a lot more resolve from them. And that is fascinating because, in a sense, it hands the terrorists a victory. The Prime Minister said in his statement this morning he had no doubt that this was deliberately linked to the G8 meeting, something he said was particularly brutal, barbarian, because of what the leaders believe they're trying to do for the world's poor. And yet, by timing this terrorist attack in London with the G8, we've had this very dramatic response from 15 of the world's most powerful leaders, including, of course, President Bush, who yet again has been talking about the war on terror in no uncertain terms.
I assume, Adam, that this war on terror was on the agenda at G8, but it obviously wasn't one of the headline issues, so there presumably could be more debate, more time spent debating it tomorrow.
I think they will certainly discuss the situation further. They were due to be discussing the Middle East this evening, and I think that's why the Foreign Secretary was chosen to take over from Sir Michael Jay, the Foreign Office official who was actually chairing the session when the Prime Minister left. Again, extraordinary scenes, the Prime Minister and his officials bundling out of the front of Gleneagles with their bags and straight into a helicopter. But I think clearly that discussion of the Middle East now will have to touch on the whole question of Iraq and Islamic fundamentalist terrorism, something one got the impression that Tony Blair and George Bush rather wanted to turn the page on at this summit, trying to get the message out to their various publics that there is more to their foreign policy than what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I suppose it's worth bearing in mind when you remind us about that lineup that stood shoulder to shoulder with Mr. Blair earlier in the day, those 14 other leaders, that very few of them have had their countries left untouched by terrorism. Almost all of them know what this feels like.
Well, I think all of them, Jeremy, and that's what their statement said. It actually said all of us have seen terrorism in our own countries. I had one South African official come up to me and say, look, you do realise we had 4 years of terrorism. We feel very profoundly for the people of London in terms of what's going on. And the other thing worth noting, obviously, this is not a head count in any sense, but it looks as if these spate of attacks are the single worst terrorist attacks in terms of the fatalities they've caused in the United Kingdom. More lives, it appears, likely to be lost than were even lost in the Omagh bombing, although, of course, September the 11th remains the worst single loss of British lives, although that was on American soil.
Adam, thanks very much. Adam Bolton, our political editor at Gleneagles at the G8 summit. Well, you may remember back to 9/11. At the time, Scotland Yard officers said that a similar sort of attack on London, well, it was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. So could anything have been done to guard against the sort of attacks we saw on the Capitol today? Here's Sky's Jonathan Samuels.
Fire, police and ambulance crews train extensively for emergencies on London's transport system. This was the last big exercise a year and a half ago. And this is the horrific reality they were preparing for and are now dealing with. London transport is clearly a soft target for terrorists. The capital's underground is the world's busiest, carrying 3 million passengers a day. London buses make nearly 5.5 million journeys daily. For terrorists, the city's transport system has many weaknesses.
The main weaknesses are the very function of the network. The network is to enable people to make short distances, vast numbers of people. You can't possibly monitor all those number of people. As I said, once you're on the network, you can go where you like on it. And you can choose your spot. If you're a suicide bomber, you can choose your spot to cause maximum mayhem and maximum damage.
In the 70s and 80s, security experts gained much experience from more than a dozen IRA bombings on the underground and rail networks. So, over the years, how has security been strengthened?
Well, we've seen there's measures to prevent the waste paper bin bombs. So the waste paper basket seems to have disappeared off the network. We've also seen the introduction of CCTV cameras. In other words, once a bomb has gone off, you can then replay the cameras and see perhaps if you can pick up a suspect. If you're dealing with suicide bombers, they're not worried about that. It's going to be ineffective because they don't care.
But, as we've seen, despite precautions, London remains a huge terror target. So, what new measures could be taken to help with our future safety?
With all of these things, it's a matter for the quality of the intelligence that the security services and the police special branch obtain. And it's a matter of infiltrating these groups, if possible. It's a matter of using undercover officers. It's a matter of getting information from the public. All those things are the only weapons that the authorities can do to counteract these kind of attacks.
The world is getting used to a new kind of terror, from New York to the train bombings in Madrid. It's a list London now joins. Its residents will ask if anything else could feasibly have been done. Jonathan Samuels, Sky News.
Well, Tony Blair now has moved down to Scotland Yard to get the very latest on the operation that will be mounted, will have been mounted by 9 o'clock this morning, the operation to try and track down those responsible for the acts of terror this morning. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt is down there. Martin, what are you hearing from your sources in Scotland Yard about the gearing up of this detection operation?
Well, clearly there's a large forensic operation going on at the scenes, the 4 explosive scenes, and the hope there, of course, is that the clues that those forensic officers amass will give them a pointer to the makeup of these bombs, and then perhaps an indication of exactly who was behind it. But clearly they're working on the assumption that these are extreme Islamic terrorists. There are hallmarks that bear resemblances to what happened at Madrid last March, a number of coordinated explosions over a period of minutes. They're trying to establish whether there were suicide bombers involved, and I can tell you that the injuries on one of the bodies from the bus at Tavistock Square indicate that possibly that was a suicide bomber. The injuries are consistent with the injuries of other suicide bombers in Iraq and in Israel. As well as that, there are other investigations going on, of course. The police are involved as well at the scenes, trying to free those remaining in the wreckage. So that's an operation that, in conjunction with the ambulance service and the fire brigade, will be going on for some hours yet.
Martin, is the suggestion that there could be an even greater casualty figure than we're already aware of now because of the lengthy operation to free people underground?
Yes, I think there's the reality is that if there are people who've been trapped for some hours now, inevitably some of those victims will be brought out dead. We had that figure of 33 confirmed dead a couple of hours ago at the press conference. You have to add to that the number of people who died on the bus. I'm told it's at least 7. I think such is the carnage there, it's very difficult for the authorities to be exactly sure how many were on that bus, but given the time of day, the proximity to a number of tourist sites, I think the assumption must be that that was a pretty busy bus, and there may be more than a dozen who died on that, but again, that's not going to become clear until later. I was told that we're looking at a figure at the moment of about 45 dead, but as we've seen on past occasions, that's the sort of figure that's likely to rise over the rest of today and over the coming days. And certainly some of those 150 who were seriously wounded, we're talking about people who have lost limbs, whose chances of survival in some cases will be slim.
Martin, presumably, whilst this operation is going on, there is a huge database of information now that they can call on that relates to previous incidents that could give them some guidance, like the Madrid bombings.
Yes, as I was saying earlier about this combing through the debris, finding bits of the bombs. On these occasions, what the anti-terrorist branch and their scientists will do will be to attempt to try and rebuild those bombs, and by doing that they can perhaps establish similarities with bombs used in previous explosions like the one in Madrid, and that might give them a pointer to the people who've done this. But I think it's worth emphasizing that whoever has done it, a group or individuals, are clearly not known either to Scotland Yard or to the security service, because, as we've said before, there are a good deal of suspects, potential suspects, who've been under surveillance for some time. The assumption must be that all of those who've been watched by the security service and police officers were under surveillance yesterday and this morning, and clearly haven't been involved, at least directly, in what happened this morning. So they must be looking at individuals or a group that they weren't aware of. But that, I think, probably wouldn't surprise them.
You're not hearing yet of any sweeps, as you might say, any series of arrests or raids around the capital or beyond?
I keep asking whether there have been any arrests, and I keep being told that there haven't been, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if overnight some suspects or potential suspects are pulled in for questioning. I think I'd be very surprised if none of that activity was going on even now. But I think it'll be some time before there's any word from Scotland Yard about what's going on exactly.
Good. Thanks very much, Martin Brunt down at Scotland Yard. I think, Annie, you've got some more information back at Sky Centre.
Yes, Jeremy, thanks very much indeed. Well, we've already heard that Al-Qaeda, or a form of Al-Qaeda, has claimed some responsibility for this via an internet website. Nobody knows if that is true or not. But let's get the very latest now. Sky's Tim Marshall has now had that translated. Tim Marshall, just getting a microphone on us for us. Hello, Tim. What have you been able to find out?
Well, two things. One, we can deconstruct the language, and it's worth doing. The second thing is that the security services have actually told Sky News that they believe the language of it is legitimate. The language of it makes sense to them. Therefore, they think the website is a real website. And it's not just, you know, some crazy student in Germany who decided to post something. They believe that the website is legitimate and makes sense. They're not saying that therefore the claim is correct. But the language is interesting. It's from secret organization group Al-Qaeda Jihad organization in Europe. Well, that has never been heard of before, but apparently the formulation in Arabic of that name does suggest that that really is an Al-Qaeda group that has posted this on the website. It goes on to say, heroic fighters of the Arab nation. Again, this is the type of language that is often used. I won't do the whole thing. Our heroic mujahideen have carried out a blessed invasion in London, meaning they have sent a squad to the capital of the United Kingdom. They're calling it an invasion.
So the key thing for that is these are not British cells operating.
That's what, exactly, that's what they're saying, that they've sent a group to do this bombing here. And Britain is now burning with fear in north, south, east, west. Well, you can take your own view on that. We've repeatedly warned the British government and the British people, and it also says we've kept our promise to carry out these invasions of the UK. And finally, and this is an interesting one, we're still warning the governments of Denmark and Italy and all the Crusader governments they will receive the same punishment if they do not pull their troops from Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, previously, after Madrid bombings, they've warned Britain. That warning has now been carried out by whichever group. Denmark and Italy will take this extremely seriously, and I would point out on the Afghanistan point that the British are about to send more troops to Afghanistan, not in response to this, but as part of the bigger picture, which is they have to hunt this group down here in the UK, but as part of the bigger picture, well, the Afghan invasion, it certainly disrupted Al-Qaeda. What it didn't do was destroy them in Afghanistan. And in the south and in near Kandahar, there are still bases and there are still people operating against British interests. And I think you're going to see the British government going to Afghanistan to try and finish the job that was begun in 2001. But I'm not linking that directly with this. But there is a link to be made that overall fight to try and root out terrorism is by far from complete, even where it started, which was Afghanistan.
Tim, thanks very much indeed. Well, we heard Tony Blair earlier saying, didn't we, that he's sure Muslim people right around the world would condemn these attacks. He also praised and paid a tribute, rather, to the stoicism and the resilience of the people of London. And even those not caught up or even injured in the blasts will have to be really resilient, because millions are on the move and travel disruption, as expected, is widespread. Let's just try and update you, if we can, on the very latest. There are currently no tube services at all in London. They've all been suspended. The latest we're hearing is that there will be no services until the morning. Buses in Zone 1 had been suspended. They were now beginning to resume. It'll take a long time to get back to a full operation. Elsewhere in the capital, a near normal service is running. Overland train service also returning to some degree of normality. King's Cross, though, does remain shut. All other train stations in the capital are now operating. People are being urged to start travelling now in order to get home. I'm sure many of you watching in offices will maybe be trying to delay it. They certainly want people to stagger their journey home. What about airports? Well, flights have been unaffected by the chaos. Tour operators and airlines are asking people to check in for flights, even if they've arrived at the airport late. Airlines will try to accommodate late arrivals. Look at those pictures of people trying to flood out. And in fact, on the M4, air travellers heading for Heathrow were seen to abandon their taxis and hot-foot it to the airport along the hard shoulder, walking, dragging their suitcases behind them in order not to miss their flights. That is how difficult the transport is at the moment. Also, we are hearing that the congestion charge has been suspended for today. People are being encouraged to car share where possible. No decision as yet made whether the charge will be waived tomorrow. We've mentioned the congestion. The schools, well, tomorrow both Westminster City Council and Camden Town Council have announced that all schools will be closed. And police have been asked not to call 999 unless they have a life-threatening emergency. Again, don't travel into the capital if you can help it. The advice is to stay at home. And once more, let's just reiterate that phone number that Scotland Yard put up for worried relatives. It is 0870 1566 344. We will continue to update you with the very latest. But if you want more travel information, it can be found on the Transport for London interactive service. That is on Sky Active. Once again, press your handset. You can find out the very latest on the explosions throughout London and the very latest on the travel as well. Also, you can visit our website sky.com/news.
The whole operation to look for those who may still be injured and trapped in underground stations or on the bus that was damaged not far from me, just around the corner in Tavistock Place. And as you can see from the state of that bomb on board the bus, our correspondent Martin Brunt is saying he's hearing they believe that is a suicide bomb. You can see that there was considerable devastation today. Now the operation is to find the perpetrators. Terror attacks on the heart of London. At least 30 dead, more than 1,000 injured.
A series of 4 blasts on bus and tube at the height of the rush hour.
The suspects, Al-Qaeda, the fear that they were suicide bombs.
Eyewitness accounts from every commuter's nightmare.
Standing shoulder to shoulder, the world's leaders unite behind Britain.
And the long journey home, travel chaos as transport is closed down.
Sky News with Jeremy Thompson and Anna Botting.
Very good evening, and the latest news in a day of news alerts and news warnings is that Network Rail have just confirmed to Sky News that there is a suspect package on board a bus outside Victoria Station, right in the heart of London as well. The very latest in a day of an emotional day for the people of London, the millions who live here, the millions who commute in and out. It should have, of course, been a day of deals up in Scotland at the G8 summit. Instead, it turned out to be a day of death on the streets of London. 4 explosions, 3 of them in underground stations, 1 on board a double-decker bus just a couple of hundred yards from where I'm standing now, left the city with a death toll of 37 now. 1,000 people believed to have been injured. The Prime Minister described it as a barbaric set of attacks, but insisted the terrorists would not succeed. Tonight, London obviously in chaos, with millions of people trying to find their way home and trying to come to terms with the fact that terrorism has visited the capital.
It was a day long feared in the capital. At Aldgate East, where the injured were treated on the pavement outside the station.
Please, if you're not being treated by any paramedic, please...
At King's Cross, where hundreds were moved to safety, having escaped the horrors below ground. And at Russell Square, what was left of the number 30 bus. Across the very heart of London, there was shock, confusion, and an almost palpable sense of fear among those caught up in the moment. The unthinkable had become reality. Below ground, in the pale emergency light, hundreds made their way through the tube carriages, a sense of claustrophobia all too apparent. Passengers battling smoke and soot. Scenes like these repeated in dozens of carriages in the 3 tube trains stuck deep in the tunnel system. Those that had escaped made their way onto the streets on the surface, traumatized.
Because all the windows came in and smashed and people are coming and my window didn't break and I got a seat. I think the worst is people standing.
So I have no idea. It was just black and we just got out, so we have no idea.
What did you hear after the explosion?
People just screaming.
You saw the carriage and it was literally the roof and the side was all over the place, and there were people like in underwear, like with their bodies covered with blood, and it was awful.
Yeah, and there's people just screaming and just asking for help, and the underground staff were trying to get the people that were safe just to walk out, and they weren't actually going into those carriages. The carriages were filled with this like dusty smoke.
With the entire tube system shut down and buses struggling to cope with crowds fleeing the area, London's road network was targeted. One of the capital's signature red double-decker buses was hit. The force of the explosion ripping the roof from the vehicle. Casualties were expected to be heavy. This was the scene captured by a passerby less than a minute after the explosion. The force of the blast blew passengers from their seats aboard the bus and left injured strewn across the road.
Just walking down through to central London, didn't even notice the bus. I just went across the road and then, just blown off my feet and stuff.
In a capital where people had woken up full of pride following yesterday's Olympic bid success, the horror of the attack was perhaps even more deeply felt. A coordinated series of bomb attacks above and below ground, targeting London's transport system with predictably appalling consequences. London's emergency services have had years to prepare for this disaster, and the biggest casualty evacuation ever seen on the streets of the capital quickly got underway. Police warning there could be further attacks.
We don't know if this is over yet. We've got to remain vigilant. The public have got to help the police and report anything that they see as suspicious to make sure we can deal with everything straight away. But we've got every resource out there at the moment, and we're doing our very best to keep London safe.
At Gleneagles, the G8 leaders stood shoulder to shoulder with Tony Blair. Later, back in London, the Prime Minister addressed the nation, promising to bring those responsible to justice.
There will, of course, now be the most intense police and security service action to make sure that we bring those responsible to justice. I would also pay tribute to the stoicism and resilience of the people of London who have responded in a way typical of them.
By late afternoon, the emergency services confirmed that all those trapped below ground had been brought up to safety. A senior police officer admitted recently it's not a question of if terrorists will hit the capital, only when. Tragically, that prophecy was realized on the streets of the capital this morning. Peter Sharp, Sky News.
Joined now by the Transport Secretary, Alistair Darling. Very good evening, Secretary of State. Give us an idea of just what the state of play is with transport around the capital tonight.
Well, the police have spent the day, along with the rest of the emergency services, in firstly rescuing those who were injured and beginning their investigation as to what and who caused this terrible crime and this terrible destruction. As of now, the position is this. The buses in central London are now starting to come back into service. The tube is starting to operate, apart from those areas affected by the attack. And by tomorrow morning, Transport for London expect a full bus service and the tube working, although obviously there's going to be some disruption for some time to come. In relation to the overground train and the London commuter services, because of the fact the mainline stations had to be closed for searching, there is a fair amount of disruption, but apart from King's Cross, which is going to be closed for a couple of days or so, and just at the moment Victoria, because of the fact there is an alert there, the other mainline stations are open and the trains are running, although, as I say, there's bound to be some disruption. I think what I would say is this, that we've got to make sure that we do everything we possibly can to find out what happened, which means that we've got to do a lot of work at the scenes of this crime, but we also want to make sure that we get transport in London and the surrounding area back to working, because I think most people would take the view that this is an appalling crime. This is a terrible tragedy for those who've lost their lives and those who are injured, but we've got to make sure that London and this country comes through this and we enable people to go about their day-to-day lives as soon as we possibly can.
Are you able to shed any light at all on the seat of the 4 blasts themselves? 3 which appear to be in underground stations or trains, the other on the bus. Can you give us any more information on those?
I think it is best at this stage to concentrate on what we do know in relation to the explosions, but it's not wise to start speculating on what the causes were, who might have done it, and so on. That's a job for the police and the other emergency services, and they're on that case now. What we've got to do is to make sure that firstly that we do everything we can to help those who've been injured, some of them very seriously, and then to do everything we can to get the transport system to functioning as normal, so that people can come in and out of London, they can move around the city and indeed other parts of the country where services have been disrupted as well. But I don't think any good will come from trying to speculate as to what might have happened. We'll know soon enough. You know, our police are pretty good at finding out what's happened here, and let's concentrate at the moment on what we do know rather than speculate on what might have happened.
Alistair Darling, Secretary of State for Transport, thanks for bringing us the latest on the transport situation in London. Let's get more now from Anna back at Sky Centre.
Yes, Jeremy, thank you. 4 explosions brutally timed for maximum impact. Here's how events developed this morning. At 8:51, there was an explosion in a tunnel about 100 yards from Liverpool Street Station at the east of the capital's financial district. It left 7 people dead. The emergency services were called immediately. Passengers on trains and stations nearby reported hearing loud bangs from the tunnels. An emergency shutdown of the electricity system soon brought the whole of the tube network to a standstill. Well, events in the city were closely followed at 8:56 by a second explosion, killing 21 people between Russell Square and King's Cross. Then at 9:17, a third blast killed 5 travellers, this time on a tube heading into Edgware Road Station in northwest London. The bomb damaged 2 other trains nearby. Half an hour later, at 9:47, there was an explosion in the back of a double-decker bus at the junction of Woburn Place and Tavistock Square. It's still not known how many passengers or bystanders died there. And while there have been reports of other blasts, the Home Secretary has only confirmed these 4.
Thanks, Anna. Well, within minutes of this morning's explosions, well-rehearsed operation went into top gear to look after the people who were wounded in this morning's explosions. Many people being ferried off to hospitals right across London in a very efficient way. And Thomas Moore, our health correspondent, can tell us a little bit more. He's got all the latest from the Royal London Hospital. Thomas.
Yes, indeed. The Royal London has treated more patients than any other from today's blast. It is only about half a mile away from Aldgate Tube Station. 200 patients have been here through the day. Most have now been discharged. 75 remain. 7 are still in a critical injured state. Sadly, 1 has died.
Within minutes of the first blast, hospitals around the capital triggered their major emergency plans. Mobile medical teams were dispatched to each of the scenes to stabilise seriously injured casualties and treat the walking wounded. The Royal London Hospital, just 500 metres from the Aldgate blast, received the largest number of casualties. The helicopter ambulance based at the hospital flew in several critically injured patients.
A convoy of double-decker buses brought those with minor injuries. Most were discharged soon after. Others needed immediate surgery.
Breaks to the legs, breaks to the bones, bony skeleton, burns, quite a lot of burns, which are fairly superficial, but nevertheless flash burns and inhalational burns as well.
Casualties were distributed around 6 hospitals across the capital. At St Mary's in Paddington, this man was treated for burns and lacerations. He had been on his way to work.
We just pulled out of Edgware Road, and next thing I know, there's a large flash of light. Felt a burning sensation on my hands, put my hands up to my face. Was on the floor by that point. Yeah, I can't recall anything prior to that, any noise, any bang. And as soon as I realised, you know, there'd been an accident, got up, had a look around, saw where the exits were. The train was a complete standstill, lights are out, a lot of smoke in the carriage, not a lot of people moving.
As patients were stabilised, some were transferred for specialist treatment. Others remain in intensive care. London's hospitals have had to cope with bomb blasts and train crashes in the past. They have major incident plans to cope with the large number of casualties. Here they brought in extra staff, more blood, and they cancelled routine operations. Doctors described the atmosphere inside A&E as calm. Medical staff learned to deal with trauma, but this was on a scale they hope never to see again. The Royal London isn't expecting to receive any further casualties now. The helipad up there on the 7th floor of the hospital, the epicentre for so many of the casualties coming through into the hospital this morning, is now quiet. It's now a matter of stabilising the patients who are up there on the wards in intensive care, and perhaps ferrying those who need specialist care out to other hospitals.
Thomas, thanks very much. Thomas at the Royal London Hospital. I'm joined now by Dr. Kerry Cooper, who's a stress and trauma specialist. Very good evening, Dr. Cooper. One imagines that apart from the physical damage done to so many people today, there will be a lot of psychological trouble for them to try and cope with. Give us an idea of how people would have been affected today.
Well, obviously they're dealing with the kind of physical trauma at the moment, and obviously stressed as well by it. But my worry is further down the line, in a week's time, in 2 weeks' time, where you get post-traumatic stress, where they worry about going on a bus, going down the tubes, any kind of form of transport. And I think that's where it's going to affect them. And also the emergency workers, who are brilliant. And once they're engaged, that's fine. But further down the line, because of the scale of this disaster, that's where they may also suffer as well. But there'll be a point in time, after dealing with all the practicalities of the physical trauma, of the injuries and everything else, the psychological ones will then boot in, and then they'll be worried about taking the tube. There'll be a whole range of kind of fears that they will have. And by the way, not just them. How about people not directly involved in this, in what happened today, but other people who say, really, do I want to take a tube now? Do I really want to go on a bus? Maybe I should take cabs, maybe I should drive. And so I think we have a whole other cohort of people not directly affected, but who indirectly will be affected by this.
How treatable are those sort of conditions?
Well, well, you know, there's a lot of kind of counseling made available to people who have kind of potential post-traumatic stress symptoms. There's kind of a lot of research, which says you don't want to force counseling on people. On the other hand, you want to make it available, and I think that's the sensible thing to do. Make it available to people directly involved in the incidents, in the range incidents, or who observe the incidents. Make it available so they can come and talk to people if they need to. Quite a lot of people may talk to their family, to close friends, to relatives about it in any case, and may not need the professional services, but make it available to them if they want to talk about it, because it's not now we have to worry about the psychological trauma. It's in a few days' time, in a week's time, 2 weeks' time.
So what you're saying, your best advice to them, you may not feel too much at the moment, but be prepared. It may hit you in a few days' time, so do seek counselling then.
Well, not necessarily seek counseling. Seek counseling if you feel you need it. The most important thing is down the line, whether it's a week from now or a few days' time, go to somebody you can talk to. It could be a close personal friend, it could be a family member, it could be your spouse or partner. Get your feelings out. Right now you're dealing with the physical trauma and the shock, but after the immediate shock, it's the post-traumatic psychological trauma I'm more worried about. Then you need to talk about it, whether it's with a professional counselor or somebody close to you, but just make sure you get what you're feeling when you feel worried about going on a tube, worried about life in the city, as it were, then you must go talk to somebody about it.
Dr. Kerry Cooper, thanks so much. Anna, you have more.
Indeed, we've been waiting for the figure of the number of fatalities in the bus attack that took place on Tavistock Square and Woburn Place. We now hear that 2 people died in that attack. We've also had a statement from Stagecoach, the company that owned and ran that bus. They have said everyone at Stagecoach is deeply saddened and shocked by this morning's tragic events, and our thoughts are very much with the victims and their families. I would like to praise our staff in London, whose reaction to this awful event has been remarkable. The bus, it was number 30 from Hackney Wick to Marble Arch, was on diversion because of the incident at King's Cross. So some irony there for those that might have been injured in the surrounding areas. Also, we've just heard the Prime Minister has visited the command centre at New Scotland Yard, where a team of senior Met Police officers are coordinating a response to the explosion. He took a look and was briefed about the operation there, and also thanked staff for their efforts as well. Also hearing that all West End theatre shows have been cancelled tonight. The congestion charge as well, if you're worried about getting back into work tomorrow, although lots of people staying at hotels and B&Bs across London, that's been suspended until Monday. Victoria Station has also been reopened. A suspect package, we've seen this before, Heathrow Terminal 3 had it earlier today, a suspect package, part of the airport was evacuated. Once again, the same at Victoria Station. That now has been reopened. And also, Security Council has unanimously passed a resolution condemning the attacks. The document expresses the Council's sympathy for the victims and urges all nations to help bring those responsible to justice. Jeremy.
Thanks, Anna. Well, of course, the hunt is on to find those who were behind this morning's terror blast. Several groups who say that they're linked to Al-Qaeda have claimed responsibility, mainly through websites, but Scotland Yard tells Sky News that they have heard nothing concrete so far from any of these groups claiming responsibility. So Sky's Tim Marshall's been examining who could have been behind the blasts.
Shocking, but not surprising. No warning from the terrorists, but one made repeatedly by the authorities.
With all the terrorist resources arrayed against us, and given that some of them are prepared to give their own lives in order to take life, it would be inconceivable really that one day some will not get through.
Ever since September the 11th, 2001, the British authorities have feared an attack. Britons died at Bali in 2002 as the war on terror and of terror got into full swing. In Istanbul in 2003, British interests and lives were directly targeted with explosions at the consulate and at the HSBC Bank.
I'm English!
Geographically, things got closer to home in Madrid last year. That attack was carried out by an Islamic terror group. London bears a striking similarity. Both operations targeted the capital city's transport network. Both took place during the morning rush hour. Madrid and London suffered multiple closely timed attacks, and on both occasions the attacks coincided with major events. In Spain, the election; in Britain, G8. The Madrid attacks indirectly led to a new Spanish government pulling its troops out of Iraq. Already a previously unknown Islamist group called Al-Qaeda in Europe is saying it carried out the London bombings in revenge for the British presence there. There's no reason to believe the claim, but the motive is likely to be connected. This is the type of group most likely to be involved. Islamist, Bin Laden-inspired, Afghan-trained. Capable of putting together the bombs, the money and the plan over the long term.
We're looking at a group of sleepers. There'll be people who have been here for many, possibly many years, who have given no evidence of any criminality or suspicion, who will have been accumulating money and accumulating material of some kind, but behaving in a normal way, amalgamating and merging with the rest of the Muslim community of London, which is very large. And one day somebody will say, well, let's go for the G8. It's our turn today.
So the hunt is on. MI6, MI5 and the anti-terrorist squad are searching for a group they now know are in the UK. That's for the short term. As part of the bigger picture, there's still Afghanistan. There are still Al-Qaeda-type bases there using drug money as finance for operations. Targeting them is about to go up the British list of priorities. Tim Marshall, Sky News.
Well, of course, we've seen Prime Minister Tony Blair not only addressing the nation on television, but visiting the main operations headquarters at Scotland Yard a short time ago. He will eventually, at the end of the day, head back to the G8, where he's chairing that G8 summit. Up in Gleneagles, awaiting his return, Adam Bolton. I think, Adam, you've got a little bit more information from Downing Street.
Yes, indeed, a quite extraordinary day for the Prime Minister. It started at breakfast time this morning with a meeting with George Bush, after which the President joked with journalists about that bicycle accident he had yesterday and announced that it was going to be a successful summit before the talking started. Very good humoured there. But now, today, the two communiques that were expected on climate change in Africa, they've been held over until tomorrow. They were due out today. And instead, we saw Tony Blair make two statements, one on his own, shortly after he'd been told of the fear of terrorist attacks during a meeting with the Chinese leader, and then an extraordinary statement flanked by 14 other world leaders, all of them making a joint statement condemning terrorism and pledging to stand resolute, all of them saying their countries knew what the threat of terrorism was and how determined they were to stand up to it. At that point, the flag here at the Gleneagles Hotel was lowered to half-mast, and the Prime Minister and his officials bundled out of the hotel, carrying their bags onto a helicopter, straight back to London, where the Prime Minister went into a Cobra briefing meeting before making that very emotional statement, which he made in Downing Street a few minutes ago, before going to visit the police headquarters. In the meantime, first the top Foreign Office official, Sir Michael Jay, and then the Foreign Secretary flew up to chair the summit in the Prime Minister's absence. Now, we've been told Mr. Blair is coming back tonight. However, there will be another meeting of Cobra tomorrow morning. That will be chaired by the Home Secretary, Charles Clarke. And Mr. Blair will go back to London to chair an afternoon session of that meeting tomorrow afternoon. That may well mean that he cancels the traditional news conference at the end of this meeting. We've simply been told that he will sum up what has been agreed at the meeting, and that tends to mean that the chairman makes a statement, televised statement at the table saying what's been agreed. I wouldn't expect the Prime Minister to hang about in Scotland 1 minute more than he needs to because he'll want to go back to London. Incidentally, his officials are asked why the Prime Minister seems so certain in his comments that this was connected to Islamic fundamentalism, would simply say that the Prime Minister has been briefed by the relevant people. We assume that is the intelligence services, and his comments, which we heard in Downing Street and earlier, about people who want to bring a fundamentalist way of life to the world clearly seem connected to that. Also, we're told that whether the Prime Minister thought it was inevitable there be such an attack, we're told that at the back of his mind, while we wished for the best, we always feared the worst. So Mr. Blair clearly shaken, but clearly buoyed up by the support he's had from the other summit participants, not just the G8 rich nations, but the emerging nations like China and India as well. And he said that there was very quickly a decision taken unanimously by the G8 that their business would not be interrupted, that they wouldn't call the whole thing off, and that they would carry on with their talks on Africa and climate change. And Mr. Blair shortly will be heading back to Scotland again to do just that.
Adam, very clear also that the Prime Minister wants to make sure that everybody knows he is at the helm at this moment of crisis.
Yes, I think so. We are seeing a Prime Minister, as we saw yesterday with the good news over London and the 2012 Olympics, who is now in his third term with no other election to fight, clearly wanting to take personal responsibility, wanting to see himself at centre stage, and also, I think, a man who believes that the correct response to an attack like this is for the Prime Minister to immediately take charge and to tell the nation what's going on. You may remember that on that fateful day of September the 11th, Mr. Blair behaved in exactly the same way, actually explaining at length how he felt about that attack in New York before the American president was allowed to do so by his own security guards.
Adam, thanks very much. Adam Bolton, our political editor at Glen Eagles at the G8 summit. Just a reminder that I'm right here in Bloomsbury in the heart of London, right close, very close to where one of the bombs exploded this morning in the underground station, very near to Russell Square, and just around the corner from the double-decker bus, the number 30 from Hackney Marshes to Marble Arch, which was also hit by a terror bomb this morning, with several people dying on board that bus. 37 we know is the casualty figure so far, the fatality figure, at least 1,000 injured as well, and our correspondents around London are telling us that hospitals are prepared for perhaps more casualties as the work of freeing people from the underground stations, the underground trains, continues tonight. Well, let's get a picture of the rush hour this evening from the Skycopter. Sarah Hughes is high above London. What does it look like from there, Sarah?
Well, we're looking at London Bridge at the moment, and you can see crowds of people walking along the bridge, trying to make their way to mainline stations. In terms of the roads, it is eerily quiet for this time on a Thursday evening. It should be rush hour. Those roads would usually be blocked, but obviously no cars have been able to get into the city today, and there aren't many coming out. But people are on foot heading out across London Bridge at the moment, and you can see that flag there flying at half-mast. The only way to get out of London, there are no tubes running. The buses in Zone 1 are not running, although we have seen some heading over the bridges recently in the last few minutes. But the only way to get out is to go on foot or to head to mainline stations.
See lots of people having to walk home. River buses have been designated as free for today at least. The congestion charge has been waived. The latest we're hearing, 37 people have been killed, 700 injured, more than 300 taken to a number of hospitals across the city. And the latest we heard, if you weren't tuned into us a few minutes ago, is that 2 people died in that bus attack on the corner of Tavistock Square. Now then, also hearing that I mentioned that all West End shows have been cancelled. If you're planning to come into London this weekend for the VE and VJ Day celebrations, that is supposed to still be taking place, but a number of events have been cancelled. The Queen concert due in Hyde Park for tomorrow will now take place in a week's time, Friday, July the 15th. REM, due in Hyde Park on Saturday, will now take place on July the 16th. I also mentioned earlier that 250 officers returned from the G8 summit up at Glen Eagles in Scotland. They are actually specifically trained to search scenes of crimes for evidence. We heard Alistair Darling, the Transport Secretary, earlier talking to Jeremy, saying that all of these areas are now scenes of crime. It will delay the reopening of all the transport systems around the country. Spain, we're hearing, expects the UK to call an emergency EU meeting, perhaps of interior ministers as well. Well, let's get more reaction now. Let's talk to the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Charles Kennedy. First of all, your reaction, Mr. Kennedy.
Well, and obviously absolutely appalling what's been taking place in London today, and the loss of life, certainly in excess, it would seem, of 40 and mounting, and the dreadful injuries that have accompanied it. So our immediate thoughts, all of us obviously as human beings, are towards those who have been injured and maimed, who have been killed in the course of these wicked series of events, and to their family and to their friends, and also our gratitude to the courage as well as the professionalism of the police and all the emergency services who are there to protect people, but also, even once a terrible carnage like this takes place, still to save life, very often by endangering their own, going into such dangerous situations to rescue those who are still living. So we owe them an enormous debt.
London, as in many cities across the world, had expected something like this perhaps since that fateful day on September the 11th. Have you been impressed with the way the emergency plan has been swung into operation?
Oh yes, very much so. And really since September the 11th, parliamentarians, privy councillors and others involved in security-related committees and work have been, in the main, kept abreast by the security services and by others, not of the detailed planning. There's no need for civilians, as it were, like us to be aware of the detail of that, but of the fact that right round Britain, key sites are very, very carefully surveilled and kept under close attention. And obviously, London, self-evidently, is a prime target as the capital city and as a great international city for all the good reasons that we were celebrating yesterday, and is a magnet for this kind of international terrorist activity, if that's what it is, although it certainly looks as if it is. And within London, obviously, the major links or major features, either prominent buildings, gathering places, or communication networks of the type that we've been seeing attacked so horribly in the course of today.
We keep talking, don't we, that it was the soft underbelly of London that has been targeted. Once again, the tube services, the bus services, the things that are easy to target. I know that 6,500 security cameras have been installed into the London Underground since September the 11th, but could more be done, do you think, to protect the millions of people who go in and out of London every day?
Well, the classic dilemma that's always raised on occasions like this is that first of all, you can probably secure as much security as can ever be achieved in any society if you turn yourself into a police state, and if our civil liberties go out the window and we can't lead any of us anything approximating a normal way of life. Even then, you can't guarantee such a thing as absolute security. It doesn't exist. And there certainly can't be absolute security where the murderer is in the process of carrying out mass murder, prepared to forfeit their own lives. That is just about impossible. Now, we do know from some reports, and we only ever hear a few that filter out, that the security services over the years have been remarkably successful in thwarting major attacks.
Yes, but you yourself, Mr. Kennedy, have been suspect, haven't you, about the control orders placed first on foreign suspects and now on just about everybody who's a suspect of terror attack. Would you change your mind now that London has been targeted, the UK mainland has been targeted by terrorists?
No, I'd want to see, obviously, the detail in coming weeks and months of what led up to this and what was involved exactly. I don't think it's right to A, get into party politics, or B, start forming rash political judgments until we know that kind of evidence. But I do think that the fundamental principle right across the political spectrum, because we're all standing shoulder to shoulder on this one, has to be absolutely clear. We are not going to bow to the terrorist by forfeiting the very thing that the terrorist detests, which is liberty. We've just been through a general election in our country. We've got our deep disagreements across the parties over various national and international issues, but people know they can go to the local polling station in peace, in security, and have their definitive say. And you have a government elected and a House of Commons elected with it. What the terrorist couldn't care less about is that individual liberty or the sanctity of people's lives. And, you know, the moral distinction that is in front of people here is between the terrorist, the mass murderer of the type that perpetrated these deeds today, and whatever one thinks about the debates and the decisions being arrived at the G8, the sight of 8 elected heads of government sitting down and trying to at least argue and debate how we can use our wealth in the developed world more effectively to help the underdeveloped or the developing world. Now, the contrast morally between those two could hardly be more stark, which is why every sane and straight-thinking person right round the globe will absolutely condemn this mass murder attack in London for what it is, precisely that.
Charles Kennedy, appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Well, let's just remind you of what we know at the moment. The latest death toll from the 4 explosions that happened in the morning rush hour this morning now stands at 37. 700 appears to be the latest confirmed figure of the numbers that were injured during the explosions this morning. One of the most graphic pictures we've seen is of the number 30 bus, which had its top ripped away by one of those 4 blasts today. This was the only explosion that was actually above ground. The bus just a few yards away from where I am, slightly hidden by the buildings behind me in Tavistock Place. It was the number 30 double-decker, familiar London Transport red bus on its way from Hackney Marshes to Marble Arch, and diverted because of some of the earlier bomb blasts around the railway and tube stations. Ironically, then clearly ran into a bomb itself, or with a terrorist on board. A suggestion from our crime correspondent Martin Brunt that police believe a suicide bomber could have been involved in that particular explosion. My colleague Andy Moore is high up overlooking this area, probably a slightly better vantage point than I've got, Andy. What are you seeing from there? What sort of feel are you getting of the city as the rush hour sends commuters on their way home?
Well, we're looking down at the bus. It's still in situ where the explosion happened. You can see the top has been ripped off, the side panels have been blown back. It seems as if the seat of the explosion was at the back, at the rear. Around it, the vehicles that were there when it was stuck in traffic, we believe it was stuck in the traffic that had been caused by the earlier explosions. Speaking to eyewitnesses, they said there were crowds leaving the train stations going towards the buses as an alternative when this explosion happened at 9:47, nearly an hour after some of the earlier explosions. We've seen forensics experts around the bus this afternoon, obviously checking for any clues. We've heard that there have been at least 2 fatalities on this bus, and we also heard, as you said, from Martin Brunt, the suspicion that there may have been a suicide bomber on board this particular bus.
Can you see, apart from that, is that whole area closed off? Because of course it's very close to Russell Square tube station, which had also been affected by another of the blasts.
Looking down towards the bus, the whole of Tavistock Square is shut off. In the foreground, immediately below me, the roads are open and there's a traffic jam developing. I'm also very close to Euston, the mainline station, which is open at the moment. It seems also that there are many emergency vehicles coming and going. It seems that they're pre-positioning themselves in case there are more incidents, and that they will be in a part of London where they are nearby if any other incidents do occur. We see a lot of people on foot trying to get home. I can just see some tourists just down below me with their suitcases. They obviously will have a very difficult problem for the tourists here in central London to get to their hotels or to get home. I did overhear an American tourist earlier on today having great problems simply getting back to their hotel, let alone collecting the luggage to get out to the airport.
And are you seeing anything of the police operation there? Presumably the detection teams, the scenes of crime, the forensic teams have been working around the bus and the underground station.
They've certainly been working around the bus. I was here very early on this morning, and at that stage there were fears that there may be a secondary explosion. So at that stage the police cordon was being extended all the time. Initially it was just, say, 100 feet or so away from the bus, and it was extended further and further back. But now it seems that there are police officers up around the bus. It's just outside the headquarters of the British Medical Association. There was debris scattered across the wall of that building, and we believe that many of the casualties were treated in the square of that building. Obviously there would have been a lot of doctors on site there to treat the many casualties that there were from that bus.
Andy, thanks very much. Andy Moore overlooking Tavistock Square and the scene where that devastated bus is still being checked out by police. Obviously this early forensic evidence could be vital in trying to find some sort of trace of the people who carried out these terrorist bombings this morning. In the meantime, of course, a man who knows all too well about terror attacks on large cities, Rudolph Giuliani, the mayor of New York at the time of the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers, and I spoke to him and got his reaction a short time ago.
They're a very eerie reminder of, September 11. I was right near Liverpool Station when I guess it was the first bombing took place, so we could hear the sirens, and then kept getting reports of different bombings in different parts of the city. And as we were walking through and driving through the streets of the city, it was remarkable how the people of London responded calmly, bravely. Our hearts go out to them. We feel a tremendous empathy with them. I think every New Yorker would probably join me in saying that we feel very, very much, and understand what you're going through. And this is a difficult time, but the people of London have responded in exactly the right way, with bravery and by moving forward. And the emergency services people appeared to have responded as if they've been very, very well trained, and were expecting, not necessarily attacks today, but at some point they were expecting attacks like this, and they seem to be prepared for it.
What did you feel was the biggest single thing you learnt in the aftermath of 9/11, something that you could pass on that would be positive and helpful for the people of London in coping with this current crisis?
In a strange way, a lot of our response to September 11 was modeling ourselves as much as we could on the people of London back during the Second World War. The incredibly brave way in which they withstood those attacks. I used that as a model for the people of New York City, and said if the people of London could go through the constant bombings every day during the Battle of Britain, we can go through what we're going through and be able to find a way out of it. So, the people of London have once again demonstrated that with this reaction to this terrible set of terrorist attacks, that they know how to care for those who have been attacked, do it in a kind and compassionate and professional way, and then at the same time, continue to move forward.
Well, of course, after 9/11, Scotland Yard officers said that a terror attack similar to 9/11 on London was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. So could anything have been done to guard against the sort of terror attacks we had this morning? Jonathan Samuel has been looking at this story.
Fire, police and ambulance crews train extensively for emergencies on London's transport system. This was the last big exercise a year and a half ago. And this is the horrific reality they were preparing for and are now dealing with. London transport is clearly a soft target for terrorists. The capital's underground is the world's busiest, carrying 3 million passengers a day. London buses make nearly 5.5 million journeys daily. For terrorists, the city's transport system has many weaknesses.
The main weaknesses are the very function of the network. The network is to enable people to make short distances, vast numbers of people. You can't possibly monitor all those number of people. As I say, once you're on the network, you can go where you like on it. And you can choose your spot. If you're a suicide bomber, you can choose your spot to cause maximum mayhem and maximum damage.
In the 70s and 80s, security experts gained much experience from more than a dozen IRA bombings on the underground and rail networks. So, over the years, how has security been strengthened?
Well, we've seen there's measures to prevent the waste paper bin bombs. So the waste paper basket seems to have disappeared off the network. We've also seen the introduction of CCTV cameras. In other words, once a bomb has gone off, you can then replay the cameras and see perhaps if you can pick up a suspect. If you're dealing with suicide bombers, they're not worried about that. It's going to be ineffective because they don't care.
But, as we've seen, despite precautions, London remains a huge terror target. So, what new measures could be taken to help with our future safety?
With all of these things, it's a matter for the quality of the intelligence that the security services and the police special branch obtain. And it's a matter of infiltrating these groups, if possible. It's a matter of using undercover officers. It's a matter of getting information from the public. All those things are the only weapons that the authorities can do to counteract these kind of attacks.
The world is getting used to a new kind of terror, from New York to the train bombings in Madrid. It's a list London now joins. Its residents will ask if anything else could feasibly have been done. Jonathan Samuels, Sky News.
Well, do please send us your photographs if you were near any of these incidents. Our email address is news@sky.com, or you can text us 84501, your thoughts as well, perhaps. But let's just bring you a reminder of the total number of fatalities, now standing at 37. 21 people killed at King's Cross Russell Square. That was the second explosion. 7 died at Edgware Road. The train was coming into the station. 3 trains in total affected in that incident. 7 died at Liverpool Street. The train was about 100 yards into the tunnel, going away from Liverpool Street, and 2 died, we've just heard this evening, on the bus at Upper Woburn Place. Eyewitnesses, though, saying that they saw more bodies, so we'll wait to see what happens with that. Tony Blair has this evening pledged not to be intimidated by terrorists. This is what he had to say.
This has been a most terrible and tragic atrocity that has cost many innocent lives. I've just attended a meeting of the government's emergency committee, received a full report from the ministers and the officials responsible. There will be announcements made in respect of the various services. In particular, we hope the underground, insofar as is possible, and rail and bus services are up and running as swiftly as possible. I would like again to express my profound condolences to the families of the victims and to those who are casualties of this terrorist act. I would also like to thank the emergency services that have been magnificent today in every respect. There will, of course, now be the most intense police and security service action to make sure that we bring those responsible to justice. I would also pay tribute to the stoicism and resilience of the people of London, who have responded in a way typical of them. In addition, I welcome the statement that's been put out by the Muslim Council of Great Britain. We know that these people act in the name of Islam, but we also know that the vast and overwhelming majority of Muslims here and abroad are decent and law-abiding people who abhor this act of terrorism every bit as much as we do. It is through terrorism that the people that have committed this terrible act express their values. And it's right at this moment that we demonstrate ours. I think we all know what they're trying to do. They're trying to use the slaughter of innocent people to cow us, to frighten us out of doing the things that we want to do, of trying to stop us going about our business as normal as we're entitled to do. And they should not and they must not succeed. When they try to intimidate us, we will not be intimidated. When they seek to change our country or our way of life by these methods, we will not be changed. When they try to divide our people or weaken our resolve, we will not be divided and our resolve will hold firm. We will show by our spirit and dignity and by a quiet but true strength that there is in the British people, that our values will long outlast theirs. The purpose of terrorism is just that. It is to terrorize people, and we will not be terrorized. I'd like once again to express my sympathy and my sorrow for those families who will be grieving so unexpectedly and tragically tonight. This is a very sad day for the British people, but we will hold true to the British way of life. Thank you.
Some very strong words and very resolute words from the Prime Minister a little while ago during his return to London from the G8 summit, and we're expecting to see him, of course, fly back to Scotland to round up the summit with the world leaders who had joined there to talk about things like climate change and the poverty in Africa. Now looks like the war on terror will be back high on the agenda when they meet again in the morning before the Prime Minister resumes down here and takes charge of the whole operation in the aftermath of this terror attack on London. Worth bearing in mind, Scotland Yard are telling us that they're receiving calls at a rate of 42,000 an hour at the moment. Calls from those concerned with friends and loved ones who may have been caught up in the attacks this morning. They say, just to remind you, that the Casualty Bureau number is as follows: 0870 156 6344. And they say because of that staggering volume of calls, 42,000 an hour, they do ask everyone to please be patient. They will get round to you, but it is taking time. Of course, apart from the world leaders in Gleneagles, other leaders around the world and other prominent people have been paying their respects as well. Condoleezza Rice, the United States Secretary of State, who was back in Washington today, went to the British Embassy on Massachusetts Avenue to sign the Book of Condolence, to pay her respects to those who died and those who were injured in the bomb blast this morning. Of course, President Bush had already spoken at the G8 and said that he stood firmly behind the British people and Prime Minister Blair and would help to hunt down those responsible. Here's Condoleezza Rice.
I've come to express on behalf of the American people our solidarity with and concern for the people of Great Britain, and particularly the people of London, on this very sad day. This is obviously an attack that demonstrates the barbarity of the terrorist with whom we are dealing. I want to express our sympathy and our prayers for the families of those who have died, and our prayers and wishes for the recovery of the injured. I also want to say that, of course, we have no better friend and ally in the struggle against terrorism than Great Britain. I know that as difficult as this day is and the kind of agony that it produces, the United States having been through this kind of agony, that it will in fact only strengthen the resolve of Great Britain, of Prime Minister Blair and his government, and of the people of Great Britain, to make certain that terrorists know that they cannot win, that we remain resolved in our determination to root out this scourge against humanity and against civilization. These were simply innocent people, many of them on their way to work on a beautiful Thursday. And so to the people of Great Britain, again, our deepest sympathies and our solidarity. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
May I just...
Well, let's just remind you of the role that's been played by the medics all around London today. Not only the ambulances on the street, but air ambulances as well have been involved in ferrying the hundreds and hundreds of people to hospitals around the city today. Anna's back at Sky Centre. You've probably got an idea about the extent of the latest figures on the number of dead and the number of casualties and the number they may still be looking for underground.
Yes, Jeremy, we have those pictures we're looking at, I think, of the Royal London Hospital. They treated 208. 26 were actually admitted to hospital, of which 3 were in intensive care. 13 people operated on, and the latest we had from that hospital was that 75 patients were still being treated, of which 10 were in a serious condition and 6 critical. But a number of hospitals have played their part. Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, for example, much more used to treating very seriously ill children, caught up right near the Russell Square incident. 18 people admitted there. Also University College Hospital, again quite near Russell Square, 50 casualties there, a number seriously injured. And it's worth remembering at those pictures there, very close to the British Medical Association. British Medical Association doctors actually came out and helped give triage and emergency help to those who were injured in that bus attack. St Mary's Hospital as well, 36 treated, and Guy's and St Thomas's, 20 patients. All of these hospitals brought quickly into play as part of this emergency plan, which has been worked out by the government over the last few years since September the 11th. And Jeremy, interesting today, we heard Tony Blair praise the stoicism of the people of London. I don't know, as you came into the city, people having to almost walk home. How did you find the mood of the people of London?
Exactly what he said, very resolute and very stoical. I mean, there clearly had been a wave of shock that must have passed through the city earlier. But by the time I arrived down from Gleneagles this afternoon, you got the feeling that people were trying their best to get on with life and knew that they had to go about their business, had to try and stay safe, had to get home, had to go to work. The streets were absolutely filled. I ended up coming in from the airport on a motorbike. It's the only way we could get through gridlocked streets. But people determined to carry on and just tens of thousands walking through the city, trying to find a way out, knowing that the tubes were locked down, the buses were locked down, not many of the mainline stations were working. What's interesting now, talking to Alistair Darling, as we were a short time ago, the Transport Secretary, him saying that that things are slowly moving back to normal. They're trying to get some of the tube lines away from the damaged areas going again. I noticed they're starting to run some of the bus routes again, and some of the suburban trains are starting to cough back into life as well. So the government obviously determined, and the transport companies, to get life back to as normal as possible, as fast as possible, all part of the build. I ended up coming in from the airport on a motorbike. It's the only way we could get through gridlocked streets. But people determined to carry on and just tens of thousands walking through the city, trying to find a way out, knowing that the tubes were locked down, the buses were locked down, not many of the mainline stations were working. What's interesting now, talking to Alistair Darling, as we were a short time ago, the Transport Secretary, him saying that that things are slowly moving back to normal. They're trying to get some of the tube lines away from the damaged areas going again. I noticed they're starting to run some of the bus routes again, and some of the suburban trains are starting to cough back into life as well. So the government obviously determined, and the transport companies, to get life back to as normal as possible, as fast as possible, all part of the business of making sure that the terrorists don't score any bigger victory than they have on the streets of the capital of Great Britain.
Yes, Jeremy, just hearing actually that overground suburban services have just started operating from King's Cross Station. That was the last of the big stations to remain closed. The long-distance services from King's Cross are still closed, so that still some disruption. But there you can see the emergency service is still very much hard at work. As I said before, more than 200 Metropolitan Police officers have flown down from G8 to help. They are specialists in scenes of crime, to investigate these crime scenes and try and find out, as Tony Blair said, who did this.
Terror attacks in the heart of London. At least 37 people are dead, 700 are injured.
A series of 4 blasts on bus and tubes at the height of the rush hour.
The suspects? Al-Qaeda. The fear that they were suicide bombers.
Eyewitness accounts from every commuter's nightmare.
Standing shoulder to shoulder, the world's leaders unite behind Britain.
and the long journey home. Travel chaos as transport is closed down.
Sky News with Mark Longhurst and Anna Botting.
Good evening, you're watching Sky News, and for our viewers in Ireland, there'll be more from Sky News Ireland at 10 o'clock tonight.
Well, today was supposed to be a day of deals at the G8 summit. Instead, it was a day of death on the streets of London.
4 explosions at the height of the morning rush hour killed at least 37 people and injured 700 others. The Prime Minister described it as a barbaric act, but insisted that the terrorists would not succeed.
Well, tonight London is in chaos as people struggle to make their way home and also come to terms with the terrorists' acts.
It was a day long feared in the capital. At Aldgate East, where the injured were treated on the pavement outside the station.
Please, if you're not being treated by any paramedic, please.
At King's Cross, where hundreds were moved to safety, having escaped the horrors below ground. And at Russell Square, what was left of the number 30 bus. Across the very heart of London, there was shock, confusion, and an almost palpable sense of fear among those caught up in the moment. The unthinkable had become reality. Below ground, in the pale emergency light, hundreds made their way through the tube carriages, a sense of claustrophobia all too apparent. Passengers battling smoke and soot. Scenes like these repeated in dozens of carriages in the 3 tube trains stuck deep in the tunnel system. Those that had escaped made their way onto the streets on the surface, traumatized.
Because all the windows came in and smashed and people are coming, and my window didn't break and I got a seat. I think the worst is people standing.
So I have no idea. It was just black and we just got out, so we have no idea.
What did you hear after the explosion?
Just screaming.
You saw the carriage and it was literally the roof and the side was all over the place, and there were people like in underwear, like with their bodies covered with blood, and it was awful.
Yeah, and there's people just screaming and just asking for help, and the underground staff were trying to get the people that were safe just to walk out, and they weren't actually going into those carriages. The carriages were filled with this like dusty smoke.
With the entire tube system shut down and buses struggling to cope with crowds fleeing the area, London's road network was targeted. One of the capital's signature red double-decker buses was hit. The force of the explosion ripping the roof from the vehicle. Casualties were expected to be heavy. This was the scene captured by a passerby less than a minute after the explosion. The force of the blast blew passengers from their seats aboard the bus and left injured strewn across the road.
Just walking down through to central London. Didn't even notice the bus, I just went across the road and then, just blown off my feet and stuff.
In a capital where people had woken up full of pride following yesterday's Olympic bid success, the horror of the attack was perhaps even more deeply felt. A coordinated series of bomb attacks above and below ground, targeting London's transport system with predictably appalling consequences. London's emergency services have had years to prepare for this disaster. The biggest casualty evacuation ever seen on the streets of the capital quickly got underway. Police warning there could be further attacks.
We don't know if this is over yet. We've got to remain vigilant. The public have got to help the police and report anything that they see as suspicious to make sure we can deal with everything straight away. But we've got every resource out there at the moment, and we're doing our very best to keep London safe.
Police wouldn't rule out the possibility that the attacks were carried out by suicide bombers.
At the moment, we don't know whether or not this was suicide bombers or whether this was simply packages left on the bus and in the underground stations. It's too early to say.
At Gleneagles, the G8 leaders stood shoulder to shoulder with Tony Blair. Later, back in London, the Prime Minister addressed the nation, promising to bring those responsible to justice.
There will, of course, now be the most intense police and security service action to make sure that we bring those responsible to justice. I would also pay tribute to the stoicism and resilience of the people of London who have responded in a way typical of them.
By late afternoon, the emergency services confirmed that all those trapped below ground had been brought up to safety. A senior police officer admitted recently it's not a question of if terrorists will hit the capital, only when. Tragically, that prophecy was realized on the streets of the capital this morning. Peter Sharp, Sky News.
Well, 4 explosions brutally timed for maximum impact. Here's how events developed through the morning. At 8:51, there was an explosion in a tunnel about 100 yards from Liverpool Street Station at the east of the capital's financial district. It left 7 people dead. The emergency services were called immediately. Passengers on trains and stations nearby reported hearing loud bangs from the tunnels. An emergency shutdown of the electricity system soon brought the whole of the tube network to a standstill. Well, events in the city were closely followed at 8:56 by a second explosion, killing 21 people between Russell Square and King's Cross. Then, at 9:17, a third blast killed 7 travellers, this time on a tube heading into Edgware Road Station in northwest London. The bomb damaged 2 other trains nearby. Well, half an hour later, at 9:47, there was an explosion in the back of a double-decker bus at the junction of Woburn Place and Tavistock Square. 2 people died there. And while there were reports of other blasts, the Home Secretary has only confirmed these 4. Mark.
Anna, let's just bring you some footage we've just received from a viewer's camera, which was on board a train in the tunnel on the Piccadilly line. We believe it's actually just behind the train that exploded between King's Cross and Russell Square. This was at about 5 to 9 this morning. Now, obviously, you can see that this carriage is being evacuated quite calmly. No smoke here in this carriage. The emergency lighting is on, and we believe this was shortly after the other train had exploded. The difficulty, of course, in the Piccadilly line, it is a very deep tunnel and therefore very difficult to get passengers out of that. But quite clearly, no panic on that particular service. People managing to get out. And of course, if you do have any pictures or footage that you've taken on a mobile camera or a mobile phone, please do send those clips to news@sky.com and obviously tell your story as well. And of course, we'll update you as we hear more of those details. Well, within minutes this morning, a well-rehearsed emergency plan went into place, with hundreds being treated at hospitals across the capital. Sky's health correspondent Thomas Moore is at the Royal London Hospital on the edge of the city, which of course, Thomas, is equipped with the air ambulance, and certainly perhaps the fact that these hospitals are so near the scene meant many were able to survive that might otherwise not have done so.
Yes, indeed. The helicopter ambulance did ferry doctors over the gridlocked streets so they could give intensive care by the roadside. Now, the Royal London did receive the largest number of casualties from today's blast. It's about half a mile from Aldgate Tube Station. 75 patients are still being treated here overnight. 8 were in a critical condition. Sadly, one of those has died. Within minutes of the first blast, hospitals around the capital triggered their major emergency plans. Mobile medical teams were dispatched to each of the scenes to stabilise seriously injured casualties and treat the walking wounded. The Royal London Hospital, just 500 metres from the Aldgate blast, received the largest number of casualties. The helicopter ambulance based at the hospital flew in several critically injured patients. A convoy of double-decker buses brought those with minor injuries. Most were discharged soon after. Others needed immediate surgery.
Breaks to the legs, breaks to the bones, bony skeleton, burns, quite a lot of burns, which are fairly superficial, but nevertheless flash burns and inhalational burns as well.
Casualties were distributed around 6 hospitals across the capital. At St Mary's in Paddington, this man was treated for burns and lacerations. He had been on his way to work.
We just pulled out of Edgware Road, and next thing I know, there's a large flash of light. Felt a burning sensation on my hands, put my hands up to my face. Was on the floor by that point. Yeah, I can't recall anything prior to that, any noise, any bang. And As soon as I realised, you know, there'd been an accident, got up, had a look around, saw where the exits were. The train was a complete standstill, lights are out, a lot of smoke in the carriage, not a lot of people moving.
As patients were stabilised, some were transferred for specialist treatment. Others remain in intensive care. London's hospitals have had to cope with bomb blasts and train crashes in the past. They have major incident plans to cope with the large number of casualties. Here they brought in extra staff, more blood, and they cancelled routine operations. Doctors described the atmosphere inside A&E as calm. Medical staff learned to deal with trauma, but this was on a scale they hope never to see again.
Well, Thomas, as you indicated, they have rehearsed for these sorts of eventualities, but of course when the real thing hits, it is a different matter. And the next 24 hours, we guess, for many of these people will be vital given the trauma they've undergone.
Yes, absolutely. It is very difficult to imagine what it's like inside a hospital when so many people arrive all at once. But I have to say, what they tend to do these days is send triage teams down to the scene. That's specialist teams who are able to sort out who needs the most urgent treatment. And they are obviously ferried back and given priority. And the staff back in hospital are warned what to expect. And that has speeded things up. There is this golden hour that emergency doctors talk about. If you can get intensive care, supportive treatment to stabilise the medical condition in that first hour, people are more likely to survive. And that's why they're so keen to keep this helicopter ambulance going. But now, of course, it's much quieter. The emergency response phase is over. Now it's a matter of stabilising people in hospital and transferring them for specialist treatment if that's what they need.
And of course, London no stranger to these terrorist attacks, nor indeed to major accidents on the railways. Many of these medical teams will have had direct experience of this before.
Sadly, that is indeed the case. It's not long ago that this hospital was dealing with the Cannon Street incident. There were many more incidents down at that St Mary's has had to put into practice its major incident plans in recent years. But they do have these plans. They do rehearse them on a regular basis, and that's why people were so calm today. They brought it out and it worked.
Thomas, thanks very much indeed.
Well, forensics experts picking over what is now a crime scene, the scene of the bus attack. We know that 2 people died there, although witnesses have said they saw more bodies. But who did this? Well, already groups who say they're linked to Al-Qaeda have claimed responsibility, although Scotland Yard says no one has actually contacted them directly. Well, Sky's Tim Marshall has been looking at who is likely to have been behind these attacks.
Shocking, but not surprising. No warning from the terrorists, but one made repeatedly by the authorities.
With all the terrorist resources arrayed against us, and given that some of them are prepared to give their own lives in order to take life, it would be inconceivable really that one day some will not get through.
Ever since September the 11th, 2001, the British authorities have feared an attack. Britons died at Bali in 2002 as the war on terror and of terror got into full swing. In Istanbul in 2003, British interests and lives were directly targeted with explosions at the consulate and at the HSBC Bank.
I'm English!
Geographically, things got closer to home in Madrid last year. That attack was carried out by an Islamic terror group. London bears a striking similarity. Both operations targeted the capital city's transport network. Both took place during the morning rush hour. Madrid and London suffered multiple closely timed attacks, and on both occasions the attacks coincided with major events. In Spain, the election; in Britain, G8. The Madrid attacks indirectly led to a new Spanish government pulling its troops out of Iraq. Already a previously unknown Islamist group called Al-Qaeda in Europe is saying it carried out the London bombings in revenge for the British presence there. There's no reason to believe the claim, but the motive is likely to be connected. This is the type of group most likely to be involved. Islamist, Bin Laden inspired, Afghan trained. Capable of putting together the bombs, the money and the plan over the long term.
We're looking at a group of sleepers. There'll be people who have been here for possibly many years, who have given no evidence of any criminality or suspicion, who will have been accumulating money and accumulating material of some kind, but behaving in a normal way, amalgamating and merging with the rest of the Muslim community of London, which is very large. And one day somebody will say, well, let's go for the G8, it's our turn today.
So the hunt is on. MI6, MI5 and the anti-terrorist squad are searching for a group they now know are in the UK. That's for the short term. As part of the bigger picture, there's still Afghanistan. There are still Al-Qaeda-type bases there using drug money as finance for operations. Targeting them is about to go up the British list of priorities. Tim Marshall, Sky News.
Well, Tim Marshall joins us here in the studio with us, and also we've got Martin Brunt down at Scotland Yard for us. Martin, if I can start with you, the who did it question always comes secondary to the recovery and rescue of people and victims. What is the latest, though, that you're getting from the control room there?
Well, clearly this is a group that they don't know. There are a number of suspects and potential suspects that have been under surveillance for some time by the police and by the security service, and the implication of what's happened is that all those that they know about as suspects were where they should have been yesterday and this morning, certainly under the gaze of their watchers. So whoever was responsible is a new group that they're not aware of, and that does present them with a problem. But at the same time, they're not surprised that a new group has emerged, because they've always warned that they never felt confident that they were watching everybody that posed a potential threat. One of the keys to the investigation now is the minute search for bits of the bombs. In these circumstances, what the forensic officers will hope to do, is to pick up as much as they can of those explosive devices, and in a sense try to rebuild them and get an idea of how they were put together, and that they hope will give them clues to the sort of people who made them. And it may well be, again, you heard in Tim's report, the great similarities with the way this operation was carried out, similarities with the way the Madrid bombings happened. They may find in putting together those bombs that there are the same sort of similarities with the devices that went off in Madrid. So that will give them some clues. But the bottom line is, I suppose, they're looking for people who they don't know about.
Tim Marshall, we know the threat level was reduced after the election. We don't want to overplay this, but was London in any way off its guard?
I don't think so. The reduction in the threat level was fairly minimal, and it was still at what is called substantial. The MI5 and other services was basically advising the Home Office, we believe there is still a substantial threat. Now, there is a slight question here. During the general election, it was at severe general. There are 6 levels. They don't make these things public, but it's not a secret either. There's severe specific, they know exactly what's going to be targeted. There's severe general, they realise something's up. And it was at severe general. After the general election, they put it down now to substantial. There may be a question about, well, hang on, this was the G8, how come you didn't put it back up for when George Bush and all the others were in town? Well, that's a question which may be asked, and it'll be interesting to see what the response is. However, the difference between severe general and substantial is pretty small, and I don't think they were off their guard. I think the intelligence services and the security services have been absolutely adamant, and for as long as I've known them over the past 3 years since 9/11, they have said, we're going to get hit. Now, if you stop 10 operations, and they may have stopped several operations already, one gets through, people call it a failure, but there have been many successes.
Martin Brunt, the key question, I suppose, is were any suicide bombers involved, and specifically at the pictures we're now looking at, the incident near Russell Square with the bus?
Yes, I mean, they may all 4 have been suicide bombers, but certainly there are indications, according to police sources, that certainly the bomb on the bus may have been the work of such a suicide bomber, and the indications come from the injuries of one of the bodies that's been retrieved, which those injuries are consistent, I'm told, with injuries of suicide bombers that authorities have seen in Israel and in Iraq. I'll spare you the grim details, but that's a clear indication that we're looking at a suicide bomber in that case. The other three, the tube bombs, may not have been the work of such bombers. We know from Madrid that remote control devices were used through mobile phones. Again, perhaps that clue might provide a link with the Madrid bombs.
Martin for the moment, and Tim, thanks very much indeed.
Let's bring you some more pictures we've just got in. This is the immediate aftermath of the bus bomb going off. Just to remind you, it's basically Upper Woburn Place into Tavistock Square. The number 30 bus had been actually due to pass King's Cross, and it was actually rerouted because of the problems at the station as everyone came out of the tube lines, and the bus driver had stopped to ask directions. And then the explosion occurred, as Martin was indicating, suggestions it may be there was a suicide bomber on board, but certainly the top of the bus was just ripped off. People were blown clear through the roof, according to eyewitnesses there. Many being treated then on the pavement from members of a nearby medical unit, and indeed many passers-by had first aid training, said they tried to save as many people as possible. Now, the official number of dead in the bus bombing is 2, but there are suggestions that that may rise as they actually gather more evidence at the scene. But just to remind you again, this bus was not in its normal route. It was actually due to pass King's Cross.
And the point about that, I suppose, is as people fled the tunnel explosion at King's Cross, they'd have come out, tried to board these buses, and found that they were also targeted. And this, Martin Brunt, we were heard saying, is a possible suspicion of a suicide bomber. There's evidence from one of the victims that it could be a suicide bomber who's involved in this one. But these are the aftermath pictures. Obviously, right now, they're picking over the fine details, trying to get the evidence of explosives, trying to get the evidence of what happened, to try and link back to find out who carried out these atrocities, because Tony Blair has pledged to bring those to justice. And also the United Nations Security Council resolution has urged nations that might have knowledge of these attacks to come forward and help find out who did this.
Just to remind you, the timings, the first explosion in that tube tunnel between King's Cross and Russell Square, 08:56, and then the bus believed to have exploded at 09:47, not even an hour in between them. So that's another thing that the police are looking at, of course, is the coordination, the timing of these 2 separate attacks above and below ground. But these pictures taken from Russell Square just a few minutes after that explosion.
Tim, while we're just looking at these pictures, we talked about this organisation that nobody knows.
Yes.
The key question has been, are these British homegrown terrorists that could have done this, or have they come in from outside? What's the feeling?
Well, it is far too early to say, and you know, we've got to be very careful about the idea of British homegrown. I mean, there have been 1 or 2 people who are homegrown, as they say, caught in the last year. Most suspicion in the last few years, most targeting has been on North Africans, people from Algeria that learnt their trade either in Algeria during the civil war in the 80s or in the camps in Afghanistan, and I think they'll start off by looking at both. Now, that communique that was posted on a website, no one's ever heard of this Al-Qaeda in Europe group before, but the Security Services told Sky News this afternoon that the formulation of the wording is one that they recognise. What they mean by that, they've got their Arabic specialists who've been through the text, they've been through the previous text, and they believe that the website is genuine.
Yeah, this is the other aspect, that where it's appeared and the nature it appeared on these recognised websites.
Yeah, the language in it is also recognisable. The goals and aims is all recognisable, and so they're treating that very seriously. They're not going on to say, therefore we think this unknown group did do this bombing, but what they are doing is saying we don't think this is some sort of, you know, crazy student in a German bedsit who's just put this up just for what he thinks is a laugh. They think it's a real website and a real group, but they don't know if it was those people. But the aims were to drive the British out of the Middle East, and secondly, as a warning to Denmark and Italy, if you don't do this, get your troops out of Iraq, you'll be next. And that's what they said to the British after Madrid.
Once again, naming another country. Tim, thanks very much indeed. Well, travel and traffic chaos obviously across the capital tonight as people attempt to make their way home. Even reports that people on the M4 abandoning their taxis and trying to walk to Heathrow Airport. It's been that bad. Let's get more now from Sky's Nicola Hill.
The motorways are crammed with people trying to get home this evening. With many offices and workplaces telling staff to leave early, the normal rush hour began mid-afternoon and has caused chaos. Passengers trying to catch flights from Heathrow abandoned their cabs, walking along the hard shoulder. In the capital itself, the train stations have been heaving, with people hoping they can still get home by public transport. Many of the passengers arriving here at Waterloo Station have actually walked across London to try and get home. Those unable to get to the east of the city, staying with friends and relatives in the southwest. There were more than 3 shifts of staff on duty at the station to direct passengers, plus many visible community support officers and discreet plainclothes security staff. Most passengers were phlegmatic.
I agree with what Mr. Blair said earlier on today, in that they're not going to beat us, we'll just carry on as normal.
People that have gone to work today to do their normal job, and they're obliterated. It's just awful, and it's been very frightening. We had the opportunity to leave work much earlier today. I feel very, very worried about actually turning up here.
Obviously, I was a bit concerned about how many people are going to be here trying to get home and what the congestion is going to be, but the terrorists certainly won't scare me off about using transport, public or main rail.
With no tubes, for some commuters the only option was to walk home. Many hotels said they're full, with people booking in for one night. All West End shows were cancelled, and many schools in London will be closed until Monday. Nicola Hill, Sky News.
Let's get an update now with Robert, who's at King's Cross. Robert, we were hearing from Network Rail earlier. They were trying to get some suburban services running, but the mainline station and obviously the tube, they're still shut.
The mainline station, I can tell you, we've just heard that platforms 8, 9 and 10 in King's Cross have opened, and St Pancras is now open as well. The rest of the services from King's Cross are not departing. It's eerily calm here. This is, for people who know London, the junction of Pentonville and Caledonian roads. This is one of the busiest parts of London. King's Cross, indeed, one of the busiest stations in the entire transport system of London. 6 underground stations go through it, as well as the mainline services. This is a scene that we're not particularly familiar with, seeing such quiet streets around it. But throughout the streets, the back streets that aren't closed off, people are gradually snaking home, and to make the commute
Robert,
even more
I'm just going to interrupt you. We're just getting something through on Reuters quoting a French minister saying that he's been told there are 50 dead now in total on the London attacks, quoting Britain's Home Secretary. We've not heard anything from Charles Clarke, of course, directly, but this is Reuters quoting a French minister. So maybe we get an update from Charles Clarke fairly shortly on that. Of course, it was known that as the work continued in the Piccadilly line tube, where Robert is there, that it may be that more bodies were discovered. Robert, the aspect of the Piccadilly line there at King's Cross is that it's a very, very deep tunnel, and they have had difficulties actually doing the rescue and recovery operation.
Indeed, we were talking to some people from the fire service who told us a few hours ago that it had gone from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. Obviously, that is taking a considerable amount of time. We've been standing here all afternoon, and there's been a constant stream of ambulances, fire trucks, even a truck carrying some scaffolding has just gone by, perhaps to secure elements of the tunnel that may have been damaged in the blast.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other aspect.
Obviously, a lot of activity still here.
Indeed, they can't obviously get those services running again until they've actually established the infrastructure, that the tunnel itself, as to whether that's been damaged in the blast.
Indeed, and I was talking to people as they were emerging from the station this morning, and it was clear that obviously it was a very large explosion in that tunnel. We were hearing stories of people being covered in soot and having to walk the 200 metres back Daily line to the platform in King's Cross, and then it was the long journey from the platform to actually get out of the station. Obviously, a huge number of people. This was at 5 to 9. Obviously, one of the busiest times in one of the busiest stations in London.
But thanks for updating us there at King's Cross.
Well, let's bring you the very latest on the transport disruptions across London now. There are currently no tube services at all in London. They've all been suspended. The latest we're hearing is that there will be no services until the morning. There had been hopes certain lines that weren't affected would be in operation. That is now not the case.
Now, in terms of the buses, Zone 1 all suspended so far, but some are starting to resume now, so they're calling it reduced service. But a near full service throughout the capital expected later on this evening.